Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Dashing for those apartment and glancing at the clock, Kathy headed straight for the bedroom, quickly pulling off her clothes and throwing them on as she went. She only had half an hour at her disposal. She mustn't be late for her date with Robert at one of Washington's finest restaurants. Therefore, it was worth hurrying. Robert was not just a man, but a gorgeous man. Robert, despite his very young age, he managed to establish himself as an outstanding director. And to top it all off, he was incredibly handsome. And his voice is low, commanding, from which all the female representatives on the set of Goosebumps ran along the skin. To say that Kathy was surprised when he offered to have dinner together, that's not to say anything. There were many actresses on the set flirting with him. And in Kathy's opinion, they were more beautiful. But his choice fell on her, to which the woman was unspeakably glad. The evening passed simply magically. Robert turned out to be a very well-read and interesting conversationalist, as Kathy herself. The time spent in his company flew by in a flash. And as it turned out, they had a lot in common. So they could talk for hours on a variety of subjects. Kathy had never been so at ease with a man. The woman did not class herself as a beauty, but apparently the men had their own opinion on this matter, because she had enough admirers. With one of them she even lived in a civil marriage for about 3 years. But over time began mutual reproaches and scandals, and parting brought only relief, which in principle was to be expected. After all, Kathy was initially clear that they are not a couple. But for some reason she decided, as they say in the People, bitch and love. But he didn't, and he wasn't with his beloved. Then there were fleeting romances, but nothing serious with none of her men. She would not want to create a family, despite the fact that recently turned 35. Deep down, like any woman, she wanted a family and children and the comforts of home badly. So when Robert started paying her attention, she shied away from him like the devil from an incense tree. She immediately decided that he was too good for a woman like her. And of course, he just wanted to have fun with her. Nothing serious could be expected. But the man was persistent. And soon she gave in and agreed to a date. After the first, there was a second, then a third, and Kathy's head was blown off. From now on, all her thoughts were occupied only with Robert. And so when she was once again going to meet her beloved, she suddenly had an unexpected thought. She sat down on the edge of the bed and began to think out loud. Well, if you think about it that way, we've been dating for a little over a month now. And I'm always thinking about him. But nothing's happened between us yet. Maybe I should invite him over. But if we're being honest with ourselves, I've wanted to for a long time. I hope he won't think badly of me. And on the other hand, be as it will be necessary to live today. The woman instantly grabbed her cell phone, knowing that at any minute she could change her mind and the whole plan would go to hell, and dialed Robert. By the sound of the voice she heard, she realized that the offer pleased him, and he promised to be at her place in about 40 minutes. Stepping over the threshold of her apartment, Robert couldn't contain his admiration. A 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Washington. It's not too cramped for you alone. The man laughed, at his own joke. No, I'm used to it. The woman shrugged with a smile. Are you taking it off? No, it's mine. I didn't expect it, Robert said. Turns out you're a very eligible bride. Well, it's just that I've been trying to keep a low profile for a while now, Kathy explained. You see, at my last job, I decided to throw a party and invited my coworkers over. After that, I had a few too many suitors. And the interesting thing is, they were mostly from out of town. You know what I mean? I think I do. Well, don't worry about me. I've got a place to live, but I don't have a woman like you. With those words, the man pulled Kathy to him and kissed her. You know, Robert stayed until morning, and they went to the movie studio together. And it was just this moment that the woman was not very happy until today. She tried to hide their relationship. And as it turned out, not in vain. When their affair became known, Aunt Kathy sprinkled slanted glances, and the leading actress began to build the deceased all sorts of intrigues. But this Kathy only amused. She was afraid of something else. Separation, because sooner or later she bored Robert, and he will part with her. Of that she had no doubt, It was only a matter of time. Well, what could she possibly tie a man like him to her? What had she done to deserve him? Nothing. Kathy, of course, had not told Robert that the apartment in the center was not all her wealth. Besides, she had a bank account and stocks, from which she had a decent income that allowed her not to work. But the woman did not want to sit at home. She owed it all to her father. 10 years ago, when after a long illness, her mother died, her father was not long left without the comfort of a widower and married a young girl. With this girl, he went abroad for permanent residence, and Kathy left the apartment and money, as if wishing to pay off his daughter, who accidentally found out that his girl was the mistress of her father while her mother was still alive. Since then, he had literally cut Kathy out of his life and called her only a couple times for her birthday and Christmas. Kathy took no offense, except that for some reason her father's calls made her feel even more lonely. But when she started dating Robert, her life took on new colors. Men more and more often stayed overnight at her place, and in the mornings they went to work together. So his things appeared in Kathy's apartment, first a razor and a toothbrush, and one morning Robert offered, "Kathy, how would you feel about me moving in with you?" The woman was confused. She hadn't expected such a question and wasn't at all prepared for it. "I mean, do you want us to live together?" "Well, yeah, I was just thinking, I spend every night with you. So what's the point of going back and forth? We're adults. Let's give it a shot. What's stopping us? I'm not talking about marriage yet, because it's too big a step for me. For now, I feel very comfortable with you, as if we were two halves of the same whole. And then we need to check how we live with ourselves, if our life will not spoil our relationship." "On what? How do you feel about living together?" Holding a cup of flavored coffee in one hand, with the other he pulled Kathy to him. She, not believing her happiness, nodded her head in agreement. "Yes, of course, I agree. Move in with me even today." A year later, Robert proposed to her. For the woman, it was not a surprise. In a year of living together, she could believe that they could have a family. Robert turned out to be quite a domestic man. In the evenings, he liked to read books with Kathy. Their tastes in literature coincided, and after reading they vigorously discussed the hero's plots. They also liked to go to the theater, to the movies, and in general, they were interesting together. But before making a proposal to the beloved, something happened that put Kathy in a deadlock. Robert challenged her to a frank conversation, and it concerned the children. "Kathy, I can see how you're fascinated by little children. And I suppose, like any woman, you want to have your own. But I want to warn you right off the bat. I'd like to state my position on fatherhood, so to speak. I never want children. Not at all. Do you understand me? If you're with me, we won't have children." Robert said what he said, and Kathy sat there like a thunderbolt. "Meaning? Are you seriously saying that now? If I understand correctly, our relationship is so meaningless to you that you don't plan to have children with me. That's where you're wrong. Everything that's going on between us is very serious to me, and I plan to start a family with you. And if at first I thought I just liked you, now I can safely say I love you, Kathy. I want to be with you forever, but I don't want to cheat on you. I'm never going to have kids ever. You either have to accept that and walk through life with me, or you don't. Decide." The woman was silent, fighting back the incoming tears. It can't be like this. It's too hard a choice. Breaking up with Robert was something she couldn't do. He was the meaning of her life, but she didn't want to live without her children either. And the worst part was that Kathy was already pregnant. Robert just didn't know it yet. And how to tell him now, she had no idea. She wanted to have a child with this man, the man she loved. Kathy began to dream of holding her baby in her arms. But at that moment, she had no idea how adamant Robert was about children. And now she was frightened. Robert. Her consternation was mistaken for reflection on what she had heard, and grabbing her arm, began to coax her. "Kathy, well, think for yourself. Are we bored, the two of us? We're free. We can travel, and no one and nothing binds us hand and foot. You loved Paris so much. If we'd had a child, would we have traveled there? No, of course not. I've never understood why family life has to be about children. A family is two people who want to be together. And it doesn't necessarily have to be cemented by children. But do you really want to be washing diapers and staying up all night? A stunned Kathy remained silent, and Robert decided she agreed with him. Tema kicked him in the cheek and went into the kitchen to make dinner. The man loved to cook, and his meals were always exquisite. A couple weeks after this conversation, Robert proposed to Kathy, and she accepted. Accordingly, he was sure she had accepted all his terms. Kathy's heart was torn to pieces. Of course, the gestational age was small, and an abortion could have been done. But she didn't even think about that option. She was already 35, and she was getting rid of the baby now. What then to wait for Robert to change their views on life? And if he didn't? Signed, Robert and Kathy modestly, without too much fuss. After the wedding, however, sat in a restaurant, inviting only about 10 common friends. The guests happily congratulated the newlyweds, noticing that the bride was too thoughtful and not very cheerful. And only one of the guests knew the real reason for this mood, Kathy Nina, a close friend of the bride. The girls had been friends since high school. And even when Nina left DC, they stayed in touch. They called each other from time to time. And recently, after another divorce, Nina came back to live back in Washington. Kathy decided to share her little secret with the book. And their last candid conversation was just before the wedding. The friend said, "If you want my opinion, it's not fair to your fiancé. He should know about your situation before you get married. And frankly, I don't understand what you're trying to accomplish. From my point of view, it's easier for him to accept the fact that you're pregnant now. But when you live together for a while and he suddenly notices your rounded belly and he can't help but notice it, that's when it'll look like you married him. By deception. But it's basically true. He was honest with you, and he dotted all the I's and T's before the wedding. What you're doing, Kathy, is despicable." The bride almost cried. "You don't understand. If I tell him, he'll just leave me, and after the wedding he won't. Are you sure about that? Then it'll only get worse. Then we'll be husband and wife, and I want to believe that he'll get over it. You're stupid, Kathy, and your plan is stupid. Look at your Robert. He's a gorgeous man. You can only dream about him. From the looks of it, he loves you. You spend all your free time together. What are you missing? Maybe you should consider an abortion before it's too late. We'll do it quietly, no dust. I'll help you. Robert won't find out. And then you can marry him with peace of mind. I don't have children either, though I've been married. In more ways than one. So, nothing. They're not really the end of the world." "No," Kathy exclaimed at the time. "We're not even talking about turnover. This baby is mine. I need him." Kathy pressed her hands to her still flat belly and stroked it, as if to soothe the budding there. Life comforting, letting her know that this new life was very important to her. Not much had changed in Kathy and Robert's lives since the signing, except for the wedding rings appearing on their fingers and a stamp in their papers. Otherwise, everything was the same. The newlyweds were always together. Robert began to plan a new trip. This time he wanted to visit Italy with his wife, and was actively discussing it with Kathy, who was increasingly silent. She knew that this trip was unlikely to happen by the time Robert planned it. Kathy's belly would already be visible, and it would be impossible to hide the obvious. Kathy pulled away as best she could on purpose with her underwear. Robert noticed that she had put on weight and was immensely proud of himself, as he believed that this was due to his own culinary skills. The man could not even guess that the reason for his wife's fullness was far from his tasty, leathery ones. And Kathy continued to be silent. What was she waiting for? Yes, she herself did not know what she wanted to prolong the moments of happiness in married life. And of course, in the back of her mind lived the hope that her husband would accept her pregnancy, when it was too late to change anything. One thing she hadn't considered. If at home she could hide the morning cab of a goat, then at the film studio immediately noticed that the woman began to react strongly to odors and often went to the bathroom. Women in such cases cannot be fooled. And then one day the unexpected happened. One of the female employees decided to congratulate Robert on his impending fatherhood. The man laughed and assured his colleague that she was mistaken, but a grain of doubt in his soul. He began to reflect and came to the conclusion that his wife behaves lately quite strange, and she had put on weight. No, it can't be, he said to himself. Kathy would never do that to him. He had told her everything, and she had agreed with his position and accepted his proposal. Even so, that same evening, while in the kitchen with his wife and arranging another of his culinary creations on plates, Robert said with a slight chuckle, "You're not going to believe this, Kathy. I was congratulated today on my impending fatherhood." The fork yanked loudly against the plate fell out of the woman's hand, and seeing her tense up, her spouse froze in place. "Kathy, maybe you can answer me too. You heard what I just told you." The woman continued to remain silent, her head low over the kitchen table. Then Robert, turning the pan of food on the stove. With one jerk, he moved a chair and sat down across from his wife. "Look me in the eye, Kathy. Tell me it's a misunderstanding. I beg you, you couldn't be so mean as to deceive me." "Yes, I could. Can you believe I'm so mean?" Kathy mumbled, but she never looked up. Robert turned pale, his mind reeling from what he had heard. And when he found out she was 4 months pregnant, he couldn't bear it. "I mean, 4 months. So when we got married, you were already pregnant, and of course, you couldn't have known about it. Why? Tell me, why did you do this to me?" And then Kathy became hysterical. She looked her spouse straight in the eyes and screamed, shook with sobs. "Why? Why is it always like this with you? You're only thinking about yourself, and I'm thinking about me. I want this baby more than anything in the world. I wanted it from you because I love you. Yeah, I didn't tell you the truth. You can take that as a lie, a betrayal, a meanness. But I don't see how having a baby could hurt us. Well, we won't be able to travel for a while until Mom's a little older. So what? I'm already 35. Robert, don't you see, I'm ripe to be a mother. It's such a blessing to give birth to someone you love." Kathy tried to take the man's hand, but he pulled her back sharply and asked in a cruel voice she had never heard before, "But you could have terminated the pregnancy. That was an option you hadn't considered." Kathy, already unable to say anything, just shook his head negatively, and Robert continued, "You and I have been together a long time. Kathy, I've never told you about my past. There are some things that are unbearable to remember and even harder to tell. You know I've been married. You asked me the reason for my divorce, and I said the first thing that came to mind. We didn't see eye to eye. I lied then. We divorced when we couldn't keep our daughter safe." Kathy gave her husband a surprised look. Yeah, you heard me. I was a father once before. My little girl was 4 years old at the time. She got sick. Acute pneumonia killed her in a couple days. It was misdiagnosed at first, and that's what made the difference. And when they realized it, it was too late. Do you have any idea how painful that is? Watching your child die and there's nothing you can do to help. I wanted to go to sleep with her forever. My wife and I couldn't go on living together, couldn't see each other. It was then that I came to the conclusion that I would never be a father again. The world around us is already full of suffering, and we have no right to condemn innocent babies to it. And I want to remind you of my decision. I gave you advance notice before the wedding. I was honest, and you did. So I don't want to see you anymore, Kathy, and I've gone to bed." Robert retired to his bedroom, slammed the door loudly behind him, and because as he did so, Kathy realized she didn't belong there. The woman is right. Worn in the next room on the couch. All night early in the morning, she heard her husband packing his things. Kathy pretended to sleep, as Robert wandered around the rooms putting his suitcase away. When he went into the hallway, she got up and walked out as if drunk. To him, she froze in the doorway, nuzzling her black pigtail with her head. "Leaving?" In a faint voice, she asked. "Yes, I'm leaving. What did you expect? I did a lot of thinking last night, and I've come to the conclusion that you shouldn't blame yourself for anything. You're a woman, and every woman wants to be a mother. But you've made your choice. I don't want this baby. And to be perfectly honest, I don't even want to see you with a belly. I don't like you being pregnant. I'm not planning on divorcing you just yet. And yes, you can put me down as the father. I'll help you with money too, but that's all you can count on." Saying all this, the husband did not look at Kathy, and then tried to leave the apartment as quickly as possible. It was difficult for him to do so, because in addition to the bulky suitcase, there were 3 huge bags of his belongings. Trying to take it all in one go, never to come back, Kathy thought and grinned bitterly. When she arrived at work, Robert was not at the movie studio. He didn't show up for the next few days either, and after about a week, the rumors started that Robert wouldn't be here again. Colleagues squinted at Kathy, some with pity and some with poorly concealed gloating. What did she want? They whispered in the corners that he would be with her all her life. It's a wonder they ever got married. Now they'd have to get a divorce. But in principle, it was clear to everyone how the show would end. And then Nina came to visit, and she wasn't planning on feeling sorry for Kathy either. What did you want? Girlfriend? You know better than that. I warned you. Remember, you could have terminated the pregnancy, and none of this would be happening now. And now you've lost such a man. Nina could have gone on for a long time. But noticing Kathy's faded look, she realized that she was only hurting her. Then she put her arm around her friend's shoulders and led her to the kitchen. Come on, girl, let's have some tea. We can't have anything stronger now, but it's not worth it. You wanted a child and you have one. Financially, you're quite confident you can provide for your baby all by yourself. And men are men. They come and go. Now you need to pull yourself together and not be nervous and eat well. Time flew by very quickly. Kathy paused from foot to foot and reached the kitchen. She was just a little bit away from giving birth, and her belly was huge, so she couldn't move around like she used to. But in spite of this, now she was singing her songs as she promised to come to her. Kathy was unspeakably glad because on maternity leave she lacked communication. Sitting all day alone in a huge apartment was hard. When she heard the doorbell, she hurried to the door and swung it open. The woman's face changed. Robert was looking at her instead of her friend. They hadn't seen each other since he packed his things and left the apartment in a hurry. The man hadn't shown up at the movie studio all this time. Apparently not wanting to meet with his wife, not once called her. Just disappeared from her life, and all reminder of him remained only the ring on Kathy's finger. And the constant longing. A lot of thoughts ran through the woman's head as she watched the present in the hallway of her spouse. And then there was a sudden hope. What if he changed his mind? What if he had come to stay? But it also immediately disappeared when Robert, without asking permission, stepped into the hallway and handed Kathy the keys to the apartment. I forgot to give them to you. I brought them myself to open them, and I didn't dare go in. Robert, seeing that his wife was in no hurry to take them, put the bunch on the nightstand in the hallway. And Kathy, whose mouth was suddenly dry, asked, You came, but you didn't have to worry about that. No, I just wanted to say goodbye. I'm leaving. Speaking with Kathy. Robert only looked at her face, carefully avoiding looking at her huge belly, tightly encased in a homemade robe. Kathy didn't really want to know the details, but Robert remained silent and waited for her to inquire about the details. So the woman squeezed out a question asking if you were going away for a long time. I hope forever. I have a friend in Germany invited me to work there. Not exactly on my profile, of course, but it is not terrible. I hope I can prove myself and do better. The woman's heart leaped out of her chest. There he stood before her. Such a beloved and dear man, and at the same time, such an alien, aloof man, averting his eyes. Why had he come at all? What would this goodbye text be for? It would have been easier to talk to him that way, much less see him. It was just unbearable. Suddenly, the room swam in Kathy's eyes, spinning on its axis, and at the same time, something very hot flowed down her legs. Lowering her eyes and struggling to focus her gaze, Kathy saw the red dribbles of her ankles. Jesus, that's blood. She managed to think. The woman before she passed out. I lost Robert, and now I'm losing the baby. This is my punishment for my lies. Robert, seeing her stagger and start to fall, managed to pick his wife up, preventing her from hitting the floor. And then I heard a scream behind me, What you did to her, you scoundrel. What happened? It was Nina, who Kathy was waiting for. She walked through the open door of the apartment and saw a frightening scene. Robert crouched on his knees, holding his bleeding, unconscious wife in his arms. I didn't do anything, he bellowed. Call an ambulance as soon as possible. The man did not wait for the doctor to come up to the apartment. He took his wife outside to wait for the ambulance near the entrance. After a while, Nina and Robert wandered around the hospital corridor waiting. They were informed that labor had begun, but was proceeding with complications. After a few hours, the doctor came out to them and addressed Robert, since he was officially the husband of the woman in labor. "Your wife can't discharge. We are deciding now, but she will probably have to have a C-section as well. I have to ask you, whose life is the priority, mom or the baby? You may have to make that difficult choice." "The mom, of course, the mom." Without thinking for a second, Robert exclaimed, "Say, Kathy, there's no choice here." Nina stood silently at a distance. She didn't know what to say. Of one thing, she was sure Kathy would not approve of this choice. If she herself were asked now, she would say with certainty that it was the child who should be saved, not her. And on the other hand, if Kathy didn't, who would raise her baby? Robert would clearly not be needed. Children's homes. From heavy thoughts, Nina clutched her head, and the doctor, having heard Robert's answer, withdrew with a quick step. And once again, the dreadful wait dragged on. Kathy's labor lasted almost 24 hours. Nina couldn't stay in the hospital the whole time. She ran in and out again. Robert, on the other hand, didn't leave for a minute. He didn't even seem to sit down once. His expression was grim, and he hadn't eaten or drunk in 24 hours. Looking at his haggard look, Nina realized how much he loved Kathy. Once again, the doctor came out to them. The robot looked at him fearfully, but the doctor was exhausted, and a satisfied smile played on his lips. "Thank goodness, Mom, and the baby are fine. You have a boy, son." But Robert let the doctor's last words pass his ears. After the anxiety he had suffered, he could not relax and realize that the danger was over. "Answer me, what's wrong with her? I'm telling you, your wife and child are alive. Their lives are no longer in danger. Daddy, you can breathe." The doctor came over and patted Robert on the shoulder, and he suddenly scampered away, leaning against the wall and covering his face with his hands. After the doctor left, Robert turned to the book. "I have to go. Tell Kathy that even though I will be living in Germany every month, she will receive a transfer from me." "What do you mean you have to go?" exclaimed the dumbfounded Nina. "Are you not even going to visit your wife?" "No, I don't see the point in that," Robert muttered his head. "We've both seen what meeting me leads to. I don't want Kathy to be unnecessarily nervous. Nothing has changed for me. I'm leaving. And don't tell her I've been here the whole time. Just tell her about the money." Robert, as if afraid to change his mind, ran down the corridor, and a confused Nina looked after him. How could it be? What is wrong with this man? He loves Kathy so much, but now he's running away. For what? Because of his principles. Stupid. How stupid. These men are strange after all. They are very difficult to understand. Nina shrugged her shoulders in bewilderment and hurried to her friend, whom the doctor had allowed to visit in the ward. Kathy watched with a smile as Thomas walked down the street. He had only recently started walking, and his movements were still rather tentative, but he was trying. Kathy longed for her husband. As she rejoiced at her son's progress, she thought how much she would like Robert to see Thomas grow and rejoice with her. Her husband kept his word and sent money every month. At first he even called, but the woman found it hard to talk, and she minimized communication only by correspondence. So, thinking about her husband, Kathy walked with her son along the house and suddenly heard a familiar voice behind her back. Who's that wonderful boy stomping around? Could it be Thomas, my favorite godson? Thomas smiled happily behind Nina, who was his godmother. She grabbed the boy in her arms and began to twirl in delight at his Libyan laughter. After Thomas was born, Nina changed her attitude towards children dramatically. She really wanted now to give birth to her own. Unfortunately, suitable candidates for the role of father did not appear on the horizon yet. Bathy's Kathy, a little Thomas, did not let him go from behind, whispered Kathy in his ear. "And I've already thought of something to give Resnick for his 1-year anniversary. It's been a long time coming, but he's gonna love it. And I won't even tell you yet. Let it be a surprise." The friends got distracted and immediately heard a loud cry. The little boy tripped and fell, scraping his ankles. But before Kathy could get to the boy, an unfamiliar man who was passing by jumped up. He lifted Thomas to his feet and went down on one knee, talked cheerfully to him. "Why is that big boy crying? Show me your hand." "Well, it's just a little scratch. No need to cry. We're men. Men don't cry." He winked at Thomas, and the boy was silent at once, looking at his palm and at the stranger with interest. While Kathy wiped his son's palms with wet wipes, Nina spoke coquettishly to the man. Lately, the woman had been on the hunt, and she regarded every male specimen as prey. And this specimen, it must be admitted, was quite good. Tall, broad-shouldered, good-looking. Kathy took Thomas in her arms and looked at the men carefully. "Don't you think? Or have we met somewhere before? Your face seems very familiar to me." He smiled. "Yes, we see you often. You always walk here with your son at this time. And I go to the cafe around the corner for lunch. I work as a sales consultant in a building supermarket." The man waved his hand toward the shopping center across the street from Kathy's house. "My name is Alex, by the way." Nina slightly grimaced upon hearing that the man was only a salesman, but nevertheless continued her onslaught on him. But to her disappointment, the man didn't pay any attention to her at all, talking only to Kathy and Thomas. A little chat. Alex ran off to work, not forgetting to wave goodbye to the boy. "Interesting individual," Nina said thoughtfully, looking after him. "But I have nothing to gain here. He is more interested in what?" "Oh, don't talk nonsense," laughed Kathy. "He was talking more to Thomas. He probably has a kid about the same age. That's why he got along so easily with my son." Maybe, Nina replied. "But I don't really care about that, by the way. You know, I'm not getting married. But as a potential father for my future child, I would consider him." That was the end of the discussion of the new acquaintance. But Kathy was not surprised when the next day, during their walk with Thomas, Nina came to visit him again. Kathy guessed that her friend was expecting to meet Alex, and he showed up, which was not surprising if, according to him, he went to the cafe every day at that time. The man didn't pass by, stopping to chat with his new acquaintances. But no matter how hard Nina tried to pull the blanket over him, all the man's attention was on Kathy and Thomas. And so it went on for a couple more days. And then Nina gave up, and then Alex never missed a day. He always stopped and spent half an hour with Kathy and the boy, referring to the fact that his lunch was an hour long. Kathy enjoyed chatting with his new acquaintance. Thomas was looking forward to seeing him. Meanwhile, the boy's birthday was approaching. Kathy told Alex that she had bought her son a children's sports complex for the youngest children, but she was not sure if she could assemble it. Then the man excitedly offered to help, but Kathy hesitated. Talking to him during walks is one thing, but to let him into her apartment is quite another. She didn't know anything about him except where he worked. Kathy asked, "What about your wife? Would she mind you helping a single woman?" Kathy's wife. "What are you talking about?" Alex smiled. "No, I have no one and never had anyone. I'm single as a finger. But judging by the way you communicate with Thomas, I thought that you have children. Well, at least some experience with them." "No, no children of my own. But I have 2 nephews, and I used to love hanging out with them until I went to DC. I'm not from around here. Wisconsin. Overnight, I decided to change my life. So I came here. Thought maybe this is where I met my destiny. And you know, met you Alex gave me a meaningful look of embarrassment and all the women she wasn't ready for. And in such a way Alex did not consider. And in general, Kathy did not look at men. Her heart was firmly occupied by Robert, thoughts of whom did not let her go. But nevertheless, Kathy let herself be persuaded and allowed the man to come to their house in the evening and help with the assembly of the sports complex. Unlike Robert, the superior from the size of the stock apartment, when he first came to her, Alex paid no attention to it. As it turned out, the man's hands grew from the right place with the assembly of the complex. He undressed pretty quickly, but he was in no hurry to leave. He played with Thomas late into the night and seemed to enjoy it immensely. Kathy had nothing to do. How to offer him dinner, to which the man gladly agreed. He left only after Kathy had hinted in no uncertain terms that it was time for Thomas to go to bed. But before that, the man had asked to go to the boy's birthday party, saying that he had already thought of what present he would buy him. Kathy was just too embarrassed to say no. And a few days later, Alex was walking out of Kathy's driveway, quite pleased with himself. Everything seemed to be working out just fine this time. He had been to Thomas's birthday party today and seemed to have left a very good opinion of himself. This time he was confident with Kathy. He would get more than he had gotten from previous women. Alex had been living in Washington for almost 2 years now and had come here with the very definite purpose of finding a well-to-do woman and living off her. He had never liked to work, but what if he had a clue? That there are a lot of wealthy and single women in Washington, delight in male attention, and for their sake they are ready to do anything. Alex has a huge plus attractive appearance. He knew his price and wanted to take advantage of it. Unfortunately, his previous Moscow relationship had ended badly. Then he targeted a much older woman who was a rich widow. Alex had succeeded in gaining her trust. The old woman seemed to fall in love with him like a cat and let him live off her. But then he asked her for a large sum of money, referring to the fact that he allegedly got involved in a murky story and was in debt. She gave him the money, of course. But at the same time, she hired a detective to follow the young lover. And that's when she found out how easy and fun he was to sit down her money in clubs. With girls of easy virtue, the woman threw Alex out of her house without even giving him a peep for his own good. Didn't want to work either, so he had to find himself a new cash cow. He found out about Kathy in a club, having met there with a Bolshie who worked at a movie studio. Having had too much to drink, she called him about her colleague, abandoned with a child, who, however, everything is easy for her, as she does not need money. Cautiously inquired about the details from neighbors Kathy and Alex. Was pleasantly surprised to learn that she owns a huge 2-bedroom apartment. How much could such an apartment be worth? I can't even imagine. This time Alex decided not to hurry and to approach the matter more carefully, so to speak, consciously. He even got a job near Kathy's house, found out what time she walks with the child. And then the man patiently walked by, looking for the right moment for acquaintance. And then the perfect opportunity presented itself. Thomas fell. The presence of the child did not frighten Alex at all, because he knew perfectly well. The easiest way to get to a mom's heart is through her kid. If the child likes you, the mother likes you. So Alex began his acquaintance flirting with the boy. If he wanted, he found common language with children, although he couldn't stand these children. Then Alex began to show persistence. The man spent most of his time with Thomas and saw perfectly well that Kathy liked it. And the boy did not want to let Uncle Alex go at all. And that was good for him too. It was just a pity that tomorrow he had to go to that hateful job again. Well, not for that. He'd come to Washington to be an errand boy. He had far-reaching plans. The children's party was over, and the guests had dispersed. Kathy invited some of her colleagues from the movie studio with young children. Thomas could not tear himself away from the many presents, but the day was too eventful, and the boy fell asleep cuddling the talking teddy bear given by Uncle Alex. Nina helped Kathy clean the apartment, but she was in no hurry to leave. She really wanted to discuss Alex. I see the salesman's been coming around a lot. Did you two have a thing? No, well, I'm willing to think about it. Alex really likes Thomas, and that's the most important thing. And Robert left us, and I can't stop thinking about him. But it doesn't have to be that way. Maybe to get it out of my head. Robert, that's exactly what I need, Alex. Yes? Then again, I've got a boy growing up, and a boy always needs a male role model in front of him. Nina pondered her friend's words, slightly biting down on her lower lip as she considered Alex for herself. She was fine with him because she was only looking at his looks, but thinking about Alex as a life partner for Kathy. For some reason, that thought made the girl uneasy. Kathy, take your time. Alex, of course, is a handsome young man, nice to talk to, funny, likes to mess around with Thomas. That's all fine, but you know what's bugging me? He's too good. I'd say he's perfect. I don't understand why, and the reality of it really bothers me. There's no such thing as a man without flaws. Robert has plenty of them, and Alex looks like he has them. But they're just not there at all. There's no such thing, especially not out of the blue. He showed up here in the apartment of a single woman with a baby. Doesn't that scare you? Kathy laughed and put her arm around her friend's shoulders. It's just more pressure. Or maybe it's jealousy? I know it very well, and I wanted to get Alex myself, but it so happened that he liked me better. Well, then it's not fate. Girlfriend, you'll meet someone else. Everything will be fine for you. Itch and was quiet for a while, and then changed the subject to discussing how much fun Thomas's birthday had been. She originally thought that talking about Alex would end it. She realized that her words could be seen as jealousy, and that makes sense in their situation. Except it wasn't. Nina wasn't jealous at all. She sincerely loved Kathy and would have been glad for her happiness, would have yielded to her this Alex herself, if she had been sure that he was really what he wanted to seem. But here was her intuition telling her that he wasn't. A couple months later, Alex moved in with Kathy. Their relationship began about 2 weeks after Thomas's birthday. One night, Alex didn't want to leave and took the initiative to kiss Kathy, and she gave in. That was the first time he stayed with her until morning. Then it began to happen more and more often. And eventually Kathy offered Alex to stay with her so he wouldn't have to rent an apartment for nothing. What was the point of coming back to the rented place in the morning and then driving here to work? Alex agreed with great joy, and on the same day he moved his belongings to her place in one small suitcase. The happiest of all was Thomas, who became very attached to Alex's uncle in the evenings. When he came back from work, the boy ran to meet him in the hallway and didn't leave the men the whole evening. Alex, to be honest, was tired of being a caring father. But he continued to play this role, gritting his teeth. When Nina came to visit them, she saw the idyll reigning in the house. But she did not talk about Alex with Kathy, believing that time will put everything in its place. Kathy has already suffered enough. She deserves happiness. And now she looks quite satisfied. Although she didn't love the man. Nina knew that for a fact. After all, not at all like the friend she had been with Robert, whom she loved to the point of madness. Today, Kathy sat at the table and looked at the frozen dinner without blinking. Alex was late from work, which had never happened before. It had been 2 hours since the store where he worked had closed, but the man was still gone. She was about to call him when she'd heard the front door open. A woman had long ago handed him the keys that used to belong to Robert. Kathy heard the cheerful minutes of Thomas greeting Uncle Alex, but there was no usual cheerful greeting from the man. And into the kitchen where Kathy was waiting for him, heating up a stale dinner. Alex walked in sad and lost. And the fact that he refused and slumped down at the kitchen table, clasping his head with his hands. Did something happen? Asked a worried Kathy. Yes, it did. I don't even know how to tell you. Kathy, there's been a major shortage in our store. And not only am I being fired, but they're making me pay for it. And I had nothing to do with it. Alex bewilderedly spread his hands. I did not take anything at all, you know. And I have no money to pay the shortages. You know, I am what I am. I don't know how to save and save money. So what do we do now? Honestly, I don't know what to do. The man folded his hands on the table in front of him and laid his head down on them with a heavy sigh. Kathy was a little confused at first, but hurried to encourage the men. Lesh, well, this can happen to anyone. Do not be so upset about it. The shortfall is big. Big, Kathy, very big. Just Alex, without raising his head, over $2,000. Where am I going to get that kind of money? I'll probably have to get a loan. She smiled. I think it is not necessary to rush into a headlong rush. It's not a very large sum. I think I can help you. I'll give you the money. Alex raised his head sharply and stared at Kathy's face in bewilderment. Do you really think it's a small amount of money? Look, there's a lot I don't know about you. You're probably on maternity leave. I don't think you make much. I'm sorry to pry. You don't have to answer, but where did you get the money? Yeah, it's no secret. My father left me a bank account and stocks that I get a monthly income from. So we can easily pay off the shortfall with you and not be disadvantaged in any way. No, I can't do that. Alex exclaimed, raising his eyebrows indignantly. It's a lot of money for me, and I'm not sure I can pay you back anytime soon. Kathy walked up to him and, putting her hands on his shoulders, said, "Don't worry, I'm helping you for free. Understand, money in life is not the most important thing we are together. And this is valuable to me. And by the way, I know why you couldn't save anything. You spent your entire paycheck buying toys for Thomas and me all the time. So take the money, pay your shortfall, and don't worry about a thing. And Kathy, I'm out of work, and I don't know when I'll get a new job. Would you want to live with me now? Like this?" But she just laughed again. "Do I give the impression of such a mercantile woman? I didn't live with you because of your salary." After much persuasion, Alex let himself be persuaded by taking money from Kathy. And the next day, he paid off the shortfall. He didn't expect it to go so smoothly. Of course, there was no actual shortfall. The man got fed up with the work, so he figured out a way to get out of there and still make a profit. For nothing. He spent so much time ducking Kathy with her vacation. He can finally get some rest, without having to get up in the morning hating the store. And he doesn't have to think about money. The main thing is not to relax and keep pussyfooting around with her and chewing on her back. Single women are so hungry for attention. After he quit his job, he started getting up at midnight. He'd eat and leave the house, supposedly to look for a new job. The man would return in the evening tired and disappointed. He complained to Kathy that he had to go to interviews all over Washington, and taking public transportation was too time-consuming. And one day, in a joking Alex way, he said, "It's a pity that you don't have a car, and you could drive me in search of a job, and you would develop a little. But you sit at home all day long." Kathy is instantly revitalized. "You know, I've been thinking about it. As long as Thomas and I lived alone, we didn't need cars. I don't like driving. I haven't driven in a long time. I'm used to it. You can buy a car, but you have to drive it. You'll do it." "Are you serious?" Alex exclaimed with joy. "You can afford a car. Definitely not kidding. But it would be just great. But if it, of course, will not cause tangible damage to your budget." "It won't," Kathy reassured the man. "Tomorrow we'll go with you to the car dealership and pick out a car for us." "Not us, but you," Alex corrected Kathy. "I don't want to be an accessory. This car will be yours alone. And I, if you wish, will be your personal driver." The next day at the car dealership, Kathy was looking at cars of medium price category. But Alex was magnetically drawn to expensive ones, especially to the client Gruzdev, whose purchase Kathy was not planning to buy. But seeing how joyfully her man's eyes glisten when he looks at this expensive car, the woman decided to take it. Although Alex discouraged, saying that he just dreams of such a car. That such a car is just a dream, and you can buy something simpler. Dreams should come true, smiled the woman, and went to formalize the expensive purchase. When she and the manager of the car dealership sat down at the checkout table, Kathy realized with dismay that she had no documents with her. First, she dug through her purse, trying to find them there, and then she emptied the entire contents of her bag onto the table. But to no avail. There were no documents. How could she forget them at home? They were always in her purse. Alex the theatrical got upset. "Well, how could it be? We went to buy a car, and you forgot your documents at home. Now we have to drive home and back again. Thomas, I'm tired. I always carry my papers with me." Alex patted the people's pocket. Kathy looked at his son sitting in his arms. The child did look tired. And then a bold idea popped into her head. "Give me your papers. We'll put the car in your name." "No, no, no. Kathy, that's impossible. This car has to be yours." "Yes. Why does it have to be? Who decided that? Who cares who it's registered to? Give me the papers," I said. And Kathy held out her hand demandingly. The man reluctantly reached into his breast pocket, pulling out his paperwork until the last of it, while the manager did the paperwork. Alex shook his head and muttered, "No, this is still wrong." The manager, who was conducting the registration, went outside for a smoke and watched a brand new Land Cruiser roll out of the showroom. The gleams in the sun fell flat on its sides. The guy grinned and thought, why are women so stupid? After all, everything is so obvious. Behind the wheel of the car sat Alex's importance. He had already praised himself 100 times for his ingenuity. for having so thoughtfully put out of the stock bag all the documents. He's a brilliant strategist after all. Knows how to push a woman's buttons. Just a hint of baby fatigue and bam, he's got the car in his pocket. Now, even if things go wrong with Kathy, if she stops sponsoring him, he'll never get that car back. It's his property now, and you can't take it from him with your teeth. It had been quite some time since he bought the car, and Alex still couldn't find a job, and it seemed like he wasn't looking for one anymore. Quietly, living on Kathy's money, the woman was not bothered by it at all. On the contrary, she was glad that Alex was spending so much time with Thomas. Sometimes he left the house in the evenings, feeling the urge to go for a ride, as he put it. Kathy, who was afraid of high speed, was happy to stay at home. She had no objection to his trips. The man she loved needed privacy, and sometimes he needed to be alone. What's the big deal? But Nina objected. She was beginning to resent the state of affairs in Kathy's household. One evening when Alex went for a drive, Nina came to visit her godson and found them alone again. She started talking to her friends. "Kathy, are you really satisfied with everything? Your Alex hasn't thought about getting a job. And in fact, where he is, we'll rot alone in your car. You're sure he's alone? Why shouldn't I trust him?" Kathy objected, shrugging her shoulders. "He called us Matyushin with him. But Alex likes a lot of speed, and I don't like it, especially with a baby in the car. So I don't mind if he goes for a ride alone sometimes. Ride alone, live off you. Kathy, are you out of your mind?" "Nina, you know I don't like to make excuses either, but I'll make an exception for you. Let's start with the fact that he's looking for a job. But I wouldn't want to take the first job that comes along. Alex is a grown man, and I'd like a decent job with a high salary. And given that we are not poor, I do not rush him. Let the man is looking for something that will be to his liking. Well, as for trust, this I have already said. I trust him as myself, so I was not afraid to register the car on him." "You did something," Nina gasped in indignation. "What do you mean? Put it in his name." "Kathy, are you crazy? I didn't expect that from you. You know, whatever Robert did to you, I've been on his side lately. You're still legally married to him, and yet you're living with another man. I don't think you should even tell your husband that. And the money. Robert, I send you money every month, a lot of it, by the way. And you're buying another man's car. Has anyone ever told me that about you before? I wouldn't have believed it. Kathy, what's going on with you when your friend says that?" Kathy's already losing her temper, raising her voice. "You know what? If you think I'm spending Robert's money on my man, I'm not. Out of what Robert sends me, I haven't spent a penny on Thomas. I opened an account, and all his father's money is transferred there. And with Alex, we live on my money. And you've quickly forgotten what Robert did to us. You're the one who comforted me and called him a jerk. Why now? Is he all white and fluffy now? Yes, if you must know, I still love him and I can't get over it. If Robert left me alone at night like that, I'd be nervous. But when Alex does it, I don't care. He's a very nice man, though, and I hope I can love him someday because honestly, I do." Kathy was quiet for a moment and then continued in a much calmer voice. "You're probably right about Robert and I not being divorced. I owe it to him to let him know that I have someone else. At least it'll be fair to them. Let them file for divorce. You know when he said he was taking it slow? At first I was happy, hoping he'd come to his senses, want to look at his son, couldn't stand it and come back to us. But with each passing month, the hope faded, and now there is no hope at all. So maybe it's time for a divorce. You're right about that. I believed he'd come back to you too." Nina said quietly, "I know, I'm pretty sure Robert loves you, but he's a very strange man. It's as if he has a stone for a heart. Does he never once want to look at his son? I don't understand. But both women were wrong. Very wrong. Robert wanted to see both Kathy and his son, but he was a man of his own oddities and unwilling to compromise his principles. Once in his life, he swore to himself not to have any more children. To him, it seemed Kathy betrayed him, secretly became pregnant, then choosing not a life with him together, but a child. But the man couldn't help himself. He wanted to see those he considered his family, even if they didn't live together. Sometimes the desire to see them became unbearable, So the man traveled to Washington. He sought his son, saw him a few times from the sidelines, stayed away so as not to disturb Kathy's heart and give her false hope of his return. But with each of his visits, the protective armor of Robert died away, and hesitation appeared in her soul. So when Robert was offered a permanent job in Germany and a residence permit, the man went to Washington again before deciding. This time he wanted to approach Kathy and his son, talk, and then decide what he really wanted. When the man drove a cab into the yard and was already paying the driver, he saw his wife and son coming out of the entrance. But they were coming out of there. They were not alone. There was a man with him, holding his son's hand. The three of them got into an expensive car parked outside the entryway and drove off in an unknown direction. Not a muscle flinched on Robert's face. When he told the cabbie, "I changed my mind and we're going back." Pulling out of the yard, the driver could not even guess what storm was raging in the soul of his passenger, how his heart was crusted with ice, and what thoughts were in his head. "You're late. You're certainly late. Kathy, beautiful woman. Did I really think she'd be alone forever? And why should she be alone? After all, I never gave her hope of my return. The man walking beside her looks good, but the child or not. He's got a nice car too, so he's well off. Well, Kathy deserves her happiness. Let her be lucky, and I'll go back to Germany for good this time. That's what I should do." It was only now that Robert realized how much he wanted to be behind the wheel of the very car that had taken his family away, or any other car or no car, for that matter, just to be near them. To spit on all his principles and his oaths. But it's too late. It's too late. And Kathy and Alex went to the supermarket that night to get groceries. It was probably the only place they ever went together. Many times Kathy suggested that Alex leave the boy with Nina to go to the movies or the theater where she and Robert often went together. But Alex was not interested. He refused, and the woman resigned herself to stopping calling him anywhere. After buying groceries, the couple returned home. Alex took the bags into the hallway and ran off, telling Kathy that he would be gone for a while, to air out. The man quickly jumped out of the entryway and pinged the alarm cars. He had already opened the driver's door when he heard a loud and caustic exclamation behind him. "But hello, hubby. I finally found you." Alex looked back frightened to see his wife in front of him. He had always been a little afraid of this overbearing, cruel woman. Years ago, she had married him to her, when her pregnancy became known, but after living with her for 8 years, Alex had run away, leaving her with 2 children. This life was not for him. What did he see? Work, work, and more work. And the wife was always not enough. She was always nagging Alex and forcing him to take part-time jobs. For 2 years, he has been hiding quite safely from his wife and from the heavy family life, pulling all the veins out of him. "How did you find me?" he asked. "What does it matter? Let it remain my secret." Jenna laughed rudely. "Is there nothing else you want to ask me?" Alex looked around again. It seemed Kathy should be busy right now, sorting through grocery bags. But what the hell was the matter? What if she looked out the window and saw him and Jenna? How would he explain all this then? The man quickly offended the cars and opened the passenger door hospitably. "Idem pro Katja, but it's a ride. Why don't we get a ride?" answered the woman and threateningly spit on the seat. With admiration began to examine the interior of the car. "And you are not bad," Alex settled down. "The car is gorgeous. And how are your children doing?" "I haven't thought about it. What do they eat? What are they wearing? Are they sick? You run away and don't pay child support. That's a good daddy." Alex focused on the road out of the yard and remained silent. He had to gather his thoughts, how to behave with Jenna. What to do next? What did she know? Did she know about Kathy? The man glanced at his wife, who was examining the contents of the stub. And when he saw Kathy's things in it, he slammed it shut with indignation. Noticing her husband's slanted glance at her, she shrieked, "What's the matter with the year? And do I know about your grandmother? You can bet your ass I do. I know everything, how you live at her expense, not working anywhere, how on her typewriter you tell. Before I approached you, I made inquiries." Alex sighed heavily. "But you see the light. You yourself know everything. You understand everything. Yes, I live at her expense. But I don't love her. Jenna squealed again. What are you talking about? You don't love her? I don't care. What do you think? Am I jealous? It's stupid to be jealous of you. You've never loved anyone. I know exactly why you're living with that woman. You didn't love me and you didn't love your children, but they're your children nonetheless. Do you have an obligation to them? I mean, you tried to file for divorce, but that's never going to happen. Remember that. The man was silent. He understood what his wife was getting at. She wanted money. Just money. And where would he get it? He was living off Kathy himself. Jenna didn't like Alex's silence, and she shouted even louder. Why don't you say something? Do you even know how much child support you owe? We're not divorced, but I filed for alimony. I could sick the bailiffs on you right now for taking so long to track you down. But I'm not going to do that just yet. That's how you're going to pay me. Your new girl's rich, fancy apartment car, and we don't have a dime to our name. Your kids, don't they deserve better? Anyway, we talked this chicken into selling. You'll take the apartment. She has all the money. We'll go away. We'll go far away. You'll live with us. I won't let you go anymore. What are you talking about? Alex was scared. How is it to persuade to sell the apartment? What do you think a crazy person would do? Kathy will never agree to that. She's already looking at me askew lately. I'm even thinking of getting a simple job, to be honest. And you think I care? Jenna smirked. Think of something. Fool your Kathy for your kids. You haven't forgotten that you have two of them, a boy and a girl. Name them. Come on, Jenna, stop wrinkling your nose like a toothache. Alex, I never forgot about the kids. But what am I supposed to do? You were always short of money. What was I supposed to do? Well, I can't, as you say, and work 3 jobs. Knowing you can't do anything but twirl your tail in front of women. So keep on wagging it. But she's doing it so that me and the kids will be well off. Do you have any idea how much your Kathy's apartment could be worth? You and I could buy a decent house in the country and live on the rest. I don't know. Lunch. Maybe we can work out some kind of business deal. Jenna, do you hear yourself? Alex howled. She won't sell the apartment. I can't make her do it. She'll lie. What is there men in such cases usually lie? Say that you have debts, that you're sick, need money for treatment. But Alex still shook his head negatively. She will not believe me. I'm all the time in front of her eyes. And even if she would believe me, she will not pay neither debts nor treatment. We've only been living together for a few months, and she has no strong feelings for me. I can see that. She may like me, but that's about it. I know how a woman behaves when she loves. Kathy doesn't love me. Jenna lowered her head and suddenly blushed. When she spoke again, tears were almost audible in her voice. Yes, you know when you're loved, and I loved you very much, you felt it. And after me, there must have been women who fell in love with you. And you betrayed them. To me, to the children of everyone you cared about. But only I know your true nature. You're a man capable of loving only yourself and valuing your well-being above everything else. Taking care of your family was beyond you. That's right. Did the kids miss you? They kept asking me where Dad was and what I should have told them. Daddy cowardly ran away and hid from us because he doesn't want to feed you. All right, Jenna, that's enough. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. It doesn't help. There's really nothing I can do. All I can do is beg. From Kathy a small amount now and then and give it to you. But there's no way to get her to sell the apartment. No, it's not enough. Very seriously answered Jenna. I will not live patiently on your meager handouts. I've already had enough from bread to water. Now I need everything at once. Suit yourself, spin. Think about it, but do what I say. Otherwise, I'll come straight to your apartment with the bailiffs. Now, let's go to the kids. Let them remember what your daddy looks like too. Maybe they'll have a little conscience. What am I talking about? What kind of conscience do you have? All right, let's go see the kids. Speaking of money, how much do you have right now? We've got to eat something and pay the rent. Kathy was sitting in a chair trying to read a book. Thomas was playing nearby, rolling his toy cars on the floor, but the woman's thoughts were occupied not with her son, but with Alex, who was watching soccer on the couch in the next room. It was the man's main occupation when he was at home to lie on the couch and stare at the TV. Even Thomas felt the detachment, began to pick up less often, were separated with requests to play with him. The woman slowly began to realize that in her mighty effort to forget Robert, she had let a man into her home without recognizing him. Bought on an outer shell, but the shell, it had to be admitted, was good. Nothing to fault. Kathy was in no hurry to make final conclusions, but she began to probe the ground and from time to time asked how the job search was going. Alex waved away, answering that he had not found anything suitable yet. "What are you looking for?" Kathy asked the question head-on. "What kind of job would be right for you?" Alex hesitated, surprised at the assertiveness of the women. His vague answers had satisfied her before. Had she begun to suspect something? Men with a charming smile approached Kathy, then poked her on the cheek. "Well, so appropriate," playfully. Conspired he to spend more time with you and for the paycheck to be normal. "I want to provide for you and Thomas fully, not just live next door." "So you're looking for a job where you can spend as little time as possible and still get a big paycheck?" Kathy asked with a chuckle. Kathy, well, there's no need to exaggerate. Alex frowned a little. At that time, Thomas, hitting the corner of the table, and Alex immediately rushed over to him. Finishing the conversation, that evening and the next few days he did not leave the child again. At first it was as if he had come to his senses, but it already seemed suspicious. And now the woman looked at the book, but could not read a single line. Thoughts kept jumping to Alex. Was she wrong about him? The woman slammed the book, shut in one sharp movement, and standing up resolutely, headed for the next room. The thought occurred to her how to check men. "Lesh, I was thinking we should sell our car," she said, coming to the sofa, where the man was lying. He seemed to be thrown on the spot, and he abruptly sat up and stared at Kathy. "What happened? Why? What's wrong with our car?" "Well, I guess we can't afford it. The tax is too high. And I made the mistake of buying such an expensive vehicle. It hit my budget. I'd say it's a big one. Let's sell it and buy something simpler." Alex was seething with anger. It was a car he'd originally considered his own and couldn't afford to sell. Besides, Kathy would probably take the money from the sale, but now he just couldn't refuse. Otherwise, it would be necessary to take the car and run away from this woman. And before, that's probably what he would have done. And now he couldn't. He was under a lot of pressure from Jenna, constantly sending threatening texts. So it was in Alex's best interest not to undermine Kathy's trust, so he responded. "What can you say? Sell means sell. Let me put an ad out. I'll meet the buyer myself." A somewhat calm woman left the room, and Alex thought to advertise doesn't mean to sell at all. "Can we stall? That's what I'll do. I'll point out the flaws to the buyers myself so they won't buy. Or you can inflate the price. The main thing is to meet with them without Kathy." Alex felt like a cornered animal. Jenna was pushing him, and it was bad timing. Kathy's eyes were starting to open. Lying on the couch was not an option right now. So the man jumped up and went to the baby. He was supposed to be meeting with the entourage today, and to leave quietly without causing Kathy's displeasure. It was necessary to pay attention to Thomas. After playing with the child for about an hour, Alex told Kathy that he would be away for a while, and the woman nodded silently. Alex drove to his wife with a heavy heart. He had nothing to please her, but every time crossing the threshold of the filming house, which was rented by Jenna with his children, the man realized that his wife was right about something. Why do their children have to live in this room? And Thomas is going crazy in there. Kathy doesn't know what toys to buy him, what to feed him. This one's got a back, a hernia, everything. You can't surprise him with food. What did that snot-nosed snot deserve, and what did Kathy deserve? She didn't earn that money herself, so in Alex's opinion, it's only fair that his kids have a good life too. Even though he left them with ease, he realized that they were his children, and he had a different attitude towards them than towards strangers. Jenna, on the other hand, met her husband with a frown. "Well, what am I happy about? Have you thought of anything?" Alex gave her a disgruntled look. "I didn't think of anything." Not only that Kathy began to look at me, My every action looks at me like under a microscope. She's been hounding me for a job. It's not gonna work out with you and me, Jenna. I knew you weren't capable of anything. Here's an idea. Think about what your Kathy cares about more than anything else in the world. What she would give all her money for without even thinking about it. Alex immediately answered yes, of course, my son. What else? Like all women, girls in general are narrow-minded, fixated on their offspring. Jenna looked at her husband almost with hatred. I'd kill you for saying that. Now you've shown your attitude toward your children. Oh, come on, he waved his hand. Why am I surprised? I know what you're like. Now, back to Kathy and her son. Suppose they steal him and demand a ransom for him. What will she do, sell her apartment? Alex, the thought of it broke out in a cold sweat. He jumped up so sharply from the chair he was sitting on that it fell to the floor. Are you completely crazy? What are you suggesting? I may like to live at other people's expense, but it's not a crime. I don't steal from anyone, they give me everything. And I'm not going to jail. Jenna, I'm not a criminal. Well, let's just say I'm not going to jail either. That's why we got to make sure I don't go to jail. You said it yourself, this broad's starting to look at you. It won't be long before she throws you out with your ass naked. And then what? I ain't gonna feed your kids alone no more, and I ain't letting you go. We'll go back to scraping by. You're gonna have to get a job, I mean. And not just sitting around, but actually working. Maybe even physically. So you might want to think about taking a chance. Jenna, what are you, stupid? She goes to the police, they'll be on to you and me in a heartbeat. That's why your job is to make sure she doesn't go to the police. You'll be with her 24/7 to talk her out of it. Send her a piece of hair from her head, her non-visible, like Thomas, and say, go to the police. Next up is the ear. I saw that in some movie, or something like that. And you're gonna scare her and talk her out of going to law enforcement. And if she's desperate enough to go to the police, we'll get her baby back. Alex left that meeting with the same heavy heart. He had a plan he didn't like very much. A few days later, Kathy was walking with Thomas on the playground in the yard of her own house. When she got the call from Alex, he had left to go to the pharmacy to get some painkillers. He had a terrible headache, so he called her for advice. What's the best drug to buy? They talked for a long time. He was stalling as long as he could. I asked him about one drug or the other. Eligibility. The woman, distracted by the conversation for a few minutes, lost sight of her son, and then looking around, did not find him near. At first, Kathy wasn't too bothered by this. She thought that the child was just playing hide and seek with her, and was now sitting behind the slide or behind the house. But the alarm began to grow and gradually turned to panic. When she ran, all the playground along and across did not find the child on it. Returning from the drugstore, Alex found Kathy in hysterics. She approached other moms walking on the playground with their kids and asked them if anyone had seen her son. All the women looked sympathetically, but shook their heads negatively. And only one said that she had probably seen a boy with similar clothes. And he was being led out of the courtyard of the apartment building by a woman in a hood. But this witness did not see her face and did not pay any attention to those who passed by, because the child was walking calmly. Hearing this, Kathy nervously pulled the phone out of her pocket and in a broken voice asked Alex police how to call the police from a cell phone, says rather. Alex did not have time to answer anything because the phone in Kathy's hands rang. The woman dropped the call, not wanting to talk to an unknown caller. She had to urgently call the police, but she did not have time to dial the number again. Another call came in. Answer it, Kathy, Alex said insistently. Answer it, it might be important. Kathy obediently raised the phone to her ear. Alex saw her face twisted. Horror at the words she heard in the receiver. The moms walking with their children twitched as they heard her hysterical scream. Who are you? Give me back Thomas. Give me back my son. Then Kathy put the phone down and looked at it confused, as if not believing what she had just heard. Then Alex jumped up to her, grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her. Kathy, who called. What did they tell you? They said they had Thomas and told me not to call the police, or I'd never see him again, the woman answered. unnaturally calm and loud. Alex looked around, worried that no one would hear her words. He took the woman by the shoulders and tried to lead her to the entrance. Let's go, let's go, let's go up to the apartment and discuss everything there. What apartment? Kathy looked at him in astonishment. What am I going to do there without my son? I'm not leaving here until I find him. Alex again, loss of cars, some women. Kathy credits himself with kidnapping him. We're not going to find him here. Let's go upstairs, and you can tell me all about it. The woman, like a mechanical doll, let Alex drive her home. There he sat her in a chair and brought her a glass of water. And then he asked her to tell clearly what you were told on the phone. Whose voice was it? Male, female? Come on, give me all the details. It was neither male nor female. Computerized. Modified, probably through some kind of program. In short, it was Kathy on the highway. This voice told me that they have my son and that we are being watched and our phones tapped. If only we would try to contact the police. I will never see my son again. It was all of a sudden a woman came by. She was hysterical. She continued to scream something coherent and tossed aside the glass of water offered by Alex. The man had to slap her in the face to bring the woman to her senses, capturing the instant reddening of her cheek. She stared at him in bewilderment. Come to your senses, he told her. This is no time to be hysterical. Thomas needs a cool-headed mother. What were you told? What were they kidnapping him for? What were their demands? Demands I don't understand, Kathy interjected. Oh yes, demands. Yes, they did. They said I had to give them money. They'll tell me the amount later. They call me back in the morning. Until then, they told me to sit tight and stay put. That's what they said, you know, don't do anything. So don't do anything, Kathy. We don't know who these people are. Aren't you scared about Thomas? You keep telling yourself to call the police. Have you ever considered that they're carrying out their threats and hurting the baby? How are you going to live with that? No way, Kathy shrugged. I can't live without my boy, but I can't just sit around and wait. I can't, you know. I have to. Alex tried to sober the woman up. Let's wait for the next call of kidnappers and find out exactly what they want from you. Money is understandable. The question is, how much will they ask for? Kathy, if it's no secret, how much do you have in that account you were talking about? Can you pay these kidnappers? When the woman said the amount, Alex inwardly gasped. He didn't expect such a thing. And also money from the sale of the apartment. So he estimated in his mind, even if he sold the apartment at a lower value because of the urgency, plus money from the account. The amount of money was so much that it made the man dizzy. And Jenna was right, that money could be used to live the rest of his life without poverty, if he didn't spend it, of course. Alex calmed Kathy, who was born like a shadow in the apartment, and from time to time began to sob. And close to midnight he put her to bed on positive sedatives. The man himself was lying next to her, fighting sleep. He was afraid he would fall asleep, and Kathy would call the police after all. She'd been dying to do it all day, and the man was not wrong. Lying down for about half an hour, she got out of bed and went into the kitchen, covering herself behind her. Following her, the man had time to see her dialing the police number and immediately snatched the phone from her hands. Kathy, what are you doing? Don't you realize you could kill your son with that call? It may sound cruel, but it's true. The woman, despite the large amount of sedative she drank, became hysterical again. I don't know what's best. I'm afraid. I can't sleep without the priest. And it was only at 3:00 a.m. that the sedative did its job, and Kathy fell asleep. Then Alex got out of bed and quietly left the apartment. He went downstairs, stepped out of the entryway, and carefully placed a small, inconspicuous box under the bench. That was the plan. And then, sitting down on that very bench, he called Jenna. So far, everything is going as we agreed, he said curtly, but she was trying to call the police again. I'm afraid to leave her alone. When you call in the morning, be more convincing. Put more fear into her. By the way, how's the kid? What's going to happen to him? Your kid? He was better worried about his own, whining all day long, asking to see his mom. Now they're gone. You better answer me. Did you find out how much you can ask for? How much is in her account? I found out, Jenna. I found out. I'll tell you right now, you're freaking out. Maybe you're right. Maybe you and I didn't go through all this for nothing. It was only 6:30 on the clock, and Kathy was already sitting with the phone in her hands, staring at it as if it were a hypnotist. She stared into the dark screen, waiting for the call to ring. Alex coaxed the woman to put the phones down, to drink coffee, to calm down a little. But Kathy didn't listen to his entreaties. The bell rang at 8:30. Waiting. Asked the emotionless mechanical voice. Waiting, and you tried to call the police. We warned you. We know all about you. You and your Haldane are under 24-hour surveillance. You shouldn't have. Oh, you shouldn't have tried that. Go down to your front porch. There's a box under the bench with a present in it for you. I'll call you back later. The phone rang a short beep. Kathy, what a pity. I jumped up and ran out of the apartment, and Alex followed her with shaking hands. The woman pulled a small black box from under the bench, but she couldn't open it. She stared at it. She was afraid to take the lid off, afraid of what she might see inside. Alex opened the box for her, and inside was a piece of dark, clean hair. It was Thomas's hair. Kathy recognized them immediately and burst into tears of relief. It was just hair. The woman was very afraid to see something worse in there. The second call came as soon as Kathy and Alex returned to the apartment. Did you find our present? We thought we'd take pity on you for a while. Next time it won't be hair. Believe me, you didn't take our words seriously. We have nothing to lose. Have you decided what's more important, money or your kid's life? How much do you want for Thomas? Stuttering voice? Kathy asked, and when she heard the answer, she shouted into the phone. But I don't have that much, just don't have that much. Then the woman put the phone down and looked at Alex with eyes full of terror. Disconnected. Confused, she said. Only they called such a sum, where I will take so much. And they also said that the term I have a week in a week I have to give them all this. Yes, the amount of course is unbearable, said Alex. Of course, you have it in your account, but you have to get the rest. Listen, what about the apartment? You can sell the apartment. Suddenly he exclaimed, as if he had just had an epiphany. The apartment, it's in your name. Well, of course it's in my name. Who else to sell the place to just never occurred to her. But first of all, the sale would take a long time, well over a week. If only the cost is lower to make 2 agencies to turn. The woman grabbed her head. And then what are we going to do? Where will my son and I live? Don't worry. Alex stepped up to Kathy and hugged her. We'll figure it out somehow. I'll go to work. I'm with you. The important thing is to get our boy back. What if they don't bring him back? What if I give them everything I have and they don't give me the baby? Then it's too late to go to the police. It has to be done now. I don't know. I don't understand anything. Kathy continued holding her head and swaying bitterly from side to side. What is the right thing to do? I'm ready to give everything. But where are the guarantees? Alex, horror recoiled from the woman. What are you, Kathy? What police? Don't you care about your son's life at all? You did not understand the meaning of the surprise in the box. Give them the money and be happy that you had it, and you were able to buy the life of your own child for them. Let's get down to business. Let's better think about the best way to get things done quickly. First of all, we need to start by cashing out your account. Or should I sell the apartments first? Yeah, the condos, of course, I can cash out anytime I want. Well, or in a couple of days. Having previously submitted an application, it's certainly not long. But the apartments are going to the agency right now. Kathy couldn't sit still. She needed something to do. And if not the police, then it was urgent to start collecting money. And sometime later, Nina was moving near Kathy's entrance with a huge bag of Lego Constructor. In her hands, she had bought for her godson. It was the 10th time she had picked up Kathy, but she wasn't picking up the phone, and Nina didn't know what to do. Calls to the intercom didn't bring any results either. Having tried for 40 minutes near the entrance and not stopping calling her friend, Nina decided to leave and come back later. And suddenly she saw a familiar car driving into the yard, barely waited until she parked and rushed to the exit Land Cruiser Kathy. Well, where are you guys driving around? Why aren't you answering your phone, Kathy? What's wrong with your phone? She asked a disgruntled Alex. It was he who had persuaded her not to answer Nina's call, explaining that it was better not to tell her friend anything. She's too chatty. Not noticing her friend's frowning face, Alex started to open the back door of the car with the words, "Where's my sweet boy? Where's Thomas?" But staring at the empty child's seat, she was surprised. "Kathy, Thomas, where did you leave him with who?" "Come, let's go upstairs to our place," Kathy replied glumly. And not only now she noticed her grief-stricken face. They went up to the apartment, went into the room, and Kathy sank down on the sofa like an inflatable doll, from which all the air had been abruptly let out, and once again began to sob for her tears. Nina could barely understand what her friend was telling her. But Alex sat down next to her, and he complimented Kathy's story. Nina couldn't sit. She walked around the couch from side to side. And when she heard the whole story, she exclaimed, "So it turns out that if you completely cash out the account and sell the apartment, the amount will be just right. Is that right? Don't you think it's weird?" "What's weird about it?" Alex answered instead of Kathy. "These kidnappers said that they were watching our every move, and it's not surprising that they know about the account. They probably made inquiries before the kidnapping." Nina gave Alex a scornful look for eyes in death, so it made the man uncomfortable. And then he said, "Alex, can't you leave the room? I want to talk to my friend, alone." He didn't move from his seat and glanced defiantly at Nina, and then at Kathy, as if looking to her for support and not wanting to get out. But Kathy only asked to get out. "Please, hurt for souls." The man got up from the couch and with his whole appearance showed his displeasure. Left the room, leaving it some time quietly opened the door, fearing that the man would overhear their conversation. And she was right. He was standing near the door, pretending to correct something on the nightstand, and at the sight of Nina sticking herself out, he retreated into the other room. It was only afterward that he closed the door tightly behind him. Nina started talking to Kathy. "Kathy, what's going on? Your son was kidnapped, and to raise the money for the ransom, you need to sell the apartment." "Who suggested that?" "Alex," Kathy answered quietly. "Strange why I'm not surprised. He offered to sell the apartment, but he didn't offer to sell the car." "Yeah, of course not. It's registered to him. You still don't find his behavior odd?" "Not as strange as it seems. I didn't tell you this, but I've been doubting him for a while now. We even put in an ad to sell the car, and then this and this. But I don't think he could steal Thomas. Is he really that sneaky? I mean, who knows? I'm not sure about anything anymore. I can't think about anything but my son. And I know that even if Alex is involved, I'll give them all the money they ask for. Everything I have, just so they can bring my boy back to me alive and unharmed. I've dashed so many times to call the police, but I'm scared, Nike, I'm scared." Ta looked at her friend with pity. She understood her. She wouldn't call the police herself because it's scary to make a mistake and jeopardize a little boy's life. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Robert looked around, as if he hadn't forgotten anything. Suitcases stowed, all bridges burned, no way back, and a one-way ticket bought. Last day in Washington. Tomorrow, he leaves for permanent residence in Germany. This decision, of course, came hard to him. But after seeing Kathy with the man, he realized there was nothing holding him here anymore. The only thing he longed for before he left was to see Kathy one last time with his son. But to his great regret, he was unable to do so. For several hours he had lingered near the playground where they usually walked, but for some reason no one had shown up. Robert sighed heavily. The tickets were for tomorrow. Robert sighed heavily. There was a feeling of wrongness or a wrong decision. Well, what else could he do? Stay, try to get back into their lives? As if she was perfectly happy being a man again right now. Robert had caused her enough pain as it was. It wasn't worth disturbing her again. He didn't know how to spend his last day in the city. But then his phone rang from an unknown number, and the woman's voice in the receiver sounded familiar. But Robert didn't recognize it until the caller introduced herself. "I'm Nana, Kathy's friend. I realize it's stupid to call you, because you're far away and you can't help me." Robert Pitty's heart was troubled by the woman's voice, and it was clear that the news was not good. But he interrupted her. "I'm going to Washington." What happened? Something with Kathy? Nina suddenly fell silent. The woman hadn't expected Robert to be in Washington and had called him for advice. Although she realized Kathy would object, so be it. Nina couldn't just sit back and wait when her godson was in danger. Kathy's not thinking straight right now. She looks like a somnambulist. They had a suspicion that Alex was drugging her friend with some powerful sedatives so that she would act on his orders. Robert is not, in fact, a stranger. He is Thomas's father and, in Nina's opinion, had a right to know everything. When Robert was beginning to lose patience with the pause in the phone, Nina's congestion happened only not with Kathy. With Thomas, I can't tell you everything over the phone. Come to my place, memorize the address. And when Robert hung up the phone, he felt like he was suffocating, as if time had suddenly reversed and he was back there, to the bedside of his dying daughter. He was feeling the same sensation now. It was exactly what he feared when he decided not to have any more children. To feel the pain and helplessness of losing his child again and not being able to do anything about it. The man huffed, looked around, and caught a glimpse of his reflection in the mirror. His lost, faded look. What on earth is this? He doesn't know anything yet about what happened to Thomas. I've got to pack up and get the books right away. No, I'm not losing this baby. That's the only thing I'm going to fight for, whatever happens there, Robert thought and started to call a cab. Alex, however, looked at Kathy, settled to one point, and sat unmoving. She was sitting at the kitchen table, clasping a frozen glass of tea between her palms. The woman had long since forgotten about him and sat immersed in herself as if in a trance. Nina was not mistaken. There was a reason her friend had been acting so strangely the last few days. Alex, however, gave her a lot of sedatives. The woman became inhibited after them, but so she succumbed to his compulsion more easily. He insisted on waiting, and she patiently waited and waited for the main event in her life. For the moment, she had to take an evening call from an unknown caller, hoping to hear her son's voice in the receiver. She begged for it, mechanical voice, rash for threats every night. And finally, the kidnappers took pity. Now she was allowed to hear a few short words from her son. "Mommy, take me away." That's what Kathy heard. Then the kidnapper took the receiver away from him, and the conversation was usually over. But Thomas's bitter cry, bursting out with words whenever he was allowed to talk to his mother, was always in Kathy's ears. Alex's deal to sell the apartment was dragging on. There were unforeseen complications, and it became clear that he would not be able to sell the apartment in a week. Kathy had acquaintances who could help him with registration and discharge. Alex did not go into details. The main thing for him was to know that the case was progressing. When it became clear that the apartment would not sell quickly, Kathy, having waited for the kidnapper's call, tearfully begged for more time, explaining why this was happening. And the kidnappers came through for her again. Of course they did. How could they not? Because Alex talked to Jenna beforehand, warned her about the sale. The man was scared, and he suggested to his wife to take the money that Kathy had on the account and not to wait for the sale of the apartment. But Jenna had gotten the taste for it, and the money didn't seem to be enough. She wanted it all, although I'm a psychologist. And about Thomas, who, as she expressed it, but does not stop asking for his mother, no one looked at her rented apartment. The apartment was paid in advance, and the neighbors knew that it was rented by a woman with 2 children. So they would not be surprised by the crying from there. But this crying irritated the light itself. In one of her phone conversations with her husband, she said she had found a way to tame it. Alex suspected that Jenna was beating the baby, but he didn't care. The main thing was not to draw attention to herself, so the neighbors wouldn't suspect anything. Frozen. Me with a glass of tea in my hands. Kathy had set it down on the table when, lying on the table, the phone suddenly rang. She knew it couldn't have been the kidnappers. They called in the evenings, and now it was morning. And glancing at the screen, Kathy was convinced of that. It was Nina. The woman spoke to her briefly and hung up, saying, "Okay, I'll be right there." "Where are you going?" Alex was worried. "Nina asked me to come to her." "Why?" "You know that the kidnappers are watching us. Maybe we shouldn't go out unnecessarily. But if they are, they'll know I'm going to my friend's house." She's withdrawn all her savings and wants to give them to me. Kathy, though a little, rose resolutely from the table, putting the untouched glass of tea on it. Nina asked me to come alone, so I'll probably call a cab. I'm afraid to drive myself. I think you know what I mean. What kind of nonsense is that? Alex exclaimed. Why do you have to take a cab when we have a car? And why is it, let me ask you, that Nina wants you to come alone? But I think you know she doesn't like you very much, but she doesn't hide it. Oh, you'd think I'd like her. Disgruntled, he muttered. But there's no need to call a cab anyway. I'll drive you and stay in the car. I won't go in to see her. But if that's the case, then well, let's go reconciliatory, smiled Kathy. When Alex drove Kathy to Nina's house and stayed waiting for her in the car, his anxiety subsided little by little. But what's the big deal? His best friend wants to help give the money that is so desperately needed right now. Will most likely give away everything she has. That makes sense. After all, Nina is also attached to that snotty, not a number. The man was sure he wouldn't make any sudden moves like calling the police. She is as afraid as Kathy of making an irreparable mistake. And Kathy, developing in the hallway, noticed that her friend was very nervous for some reason. Walking into the room, she immediately realized what the reason was. Robert was there. He had jumped out of his seat at the sight of Kathy and now stood looking at her silently. Kathy turned around abruptly and looked at her friend, who was shifting from foot to foot, behind her. Nina, what is this? Why did you tell him everything you did? All her congestion from taking the drug instantly flew off Kathy. She was shaken all over by Robert's presence and the act done without his knowledge. Though she felt a little guilty about it, she immediately raised her voice too. Yes, I called Robert and called him and told him everything, because I think he has a right to know, and so does his son. His son. As far as he was concerned, Robert didn't want to know. Kathy came from them and tried not to even look in the direction of the silently standing spouse. He didn't need us. He left us. He doesn't care. No, he does care. Nina argued with her, and he is not a stranger to you. The woman lowered her voice and continued much more quietly. I know, Kathy, I saw him in the hospital when you were in labor. He was there until the end. I didn't tell you that, but I know for a fact a man can't be so worried if he doesn't care. Kathy came into the conversation. Robert, our disagreement with you is not that important right now. What's more important is finding Thomas and bringing him back. Thomas, Kathy whispered. Do you know Thomas? He's your son, and you've never even met him. I have. Robert lowered his head and continued without looking Kathy in the eye. I've seen you a few times, watched you when you were walking in the yard. But I didn't come over, afraid to disturb you, because I didn't know what I really wanted. Now, so you know, the man grinned bitterly. Yes, I do. The moment I saw you with another man, I was sure of what I wanted. That's when I realized I was too late. I don't know why I thought I could get you back at any moment. I'm sorry, Kathy, I was wrong. I was afraid to live, to really live, afraid of pain. What am I feeling now? It's fear for my child. You know I've already suffered a great loss, but now I realize there is no life without suffering. No life without you, and without my son. Kathy couldn't take it anymore, she cried. Robert, everything you're saying right now doesn't matter to me. The only thing I want is Thomas back. That's all I've been living for the last few days. I'm afraid, terribly afraid of making a mistake and losing him forever. That's what you're planning to do. If you're gonna call the police, then no. I'm not gonna let you do that because I'm scared. But I've already realized that. But Nina told me that you suspect that you're his Alex. What do you think about that? Yes, we do. And the further we go, the more so. Alex is behaving very strangely, watching my every move, checking up on my account, how much money I have, how much my apartment is worth, fussing about selling it. And I would even say more than me, and I'm an idiot. I know that. Letting a stranger in without looking at him, without recognizing him. You could say I didn't care. I so desperately wanted to forget. Kathy cast a fleeting glance at Robert and continued in a near whisper to forget you. At those words, Robert stepped toward her and enveloped her in a hug. She clung to him with her whole body, clinging to him as if he were a solid bulwark. Confidence. And Robert said in a voice hoarse with excitement, "Kathy, you're not a fool, I'm a fool. If I hadn't left you, none of this would have happened. But I'll make it right. We'll get our son back, I promise, and I'll do anything for it." And when Kathy came out of the driveway an hour later, Alex was finishing his phone call. "No, I'm telling you, I can't show you the car right now." She hurricaned through it, checking all the faucets. As she did so, the grandmother looked at the two children playing in the only room and another crying. The younger boy bent over a bowl of porridge in the kitchen. With that, Grandma left the apartment, nudging the recovering Jenna in the back. "Are you sure? I'm not leaking anything. What a mess I'm in." Even though Jenna was angry, she didn't see anything suspicious in the neighbor's visit. And the grandmother went downstairs and held out her palm to Robert, who was standing there. "Give me the money." "I watched everything in the apartment of a woman and 3 children." "You're not wrong. There's definitely 3, definitely a girl and 2 boys. One's just a little kid." This Robert showed the grandmother a picture of her son on the screen of his phone. The old woman looked at the screen carefully. "I can't see very well without my glasses, but it looks like him." Yeah, that's him." Robert jumped out of the doorway, greedily gulping air with his mouth. How had it all turned out so fast? He found him, found his son. More than anything in the world, he wanted now to burst into that apartment and rip Thomas out of this Jenna's hands. But he was a little scared. What if she saw him and did something to hurt the child? The man had promised Martin to report all his actions, so he found the strength to call a friend first on hearing the news, and the latter told Robert not to do anything, but to wait until he arrived at the scene supercilly. "But I can't wait," Robert exclaimed. "When else are you going to get here? I'll go right now and get my son." You can't do that." Robert came to his senses. "We're going to get there real fast, even if you succeed, and you take that woman's baby away from her. Then Jenna will run off with Alex, and we won't be able to prove anything. You want the criminals to go unpunished." She also told Kathy not to say anything yet. "No way, you hear me?" She would give away her joy in front of Alex. And Jenna was very surprised when only half an hour after the neighbor's visit, the bell rang again in her apartment. Looking through the peephole, she saw the same old woman living downstairs. With irritation, the woman opened the door at the same time swearing, "What more do you want from me?" But she had no time to do anything, as uniformed men burst into the apartment, pressed her face against the wall, and handcuffs clicked on her hands. The last to run into the apartment was a tall, black-haired man in civilian clothes. He rushed over to the frightened and huddled Muzat in Thomas's corner and grabbed him in his arms. The boy was crying, and the man kept stroking his head and repeating, "Don't be afraid. It's over. I'm your daddy, you hear me? I'm daddy. I'm taking you to mommy." Martin approached the woman facing the wall. Svetlana removed the handcuffs from the woman and shoved her own phone, found on the table, into her hands. "Call your husband. Tell him to come here immediately." Without explaining anything, Jenna was pale, her eyes remained dry. "My children." She pointed her hand in the direction of the frightened boy and girl. "They are scared. Can I go to them?" "So you feel sorry for your own children, but you can bully other people's children." Martin grinned. "I will allow you to calm the children only after you call your husband here. Make up a good reason and tell him to come right away." Jenna helplessly took the phone in her hands and dialed her husband. "Alex, come right away. Something has happened with Thomas. I can't tell you everything over the phone." Yes, hurry, right now." When Alex ran into Jenna's apartment, he had no time to see anything, because right in the hallway he was met with a blow to the face. Robert hit him furiously, all the while repeating, "This is for my son, and this is for my wife." A young guy from the task force rushed to pull Robert away, but Martin stopped him with the words, "Don't. Wait, he's entitled to it. That scumbag is getting what he deserves." And the happy Kathy did not come down from the hands of her son, who paid for it himself with his little arms around her neck, and could not tear himself away from his mom. At this picture, Robert looked on with a happy smile. He appeared on the doorstep with his son in his arms, Some time after, Alex jumped out after an incomprehensible phone call, mumbled something inaudible to Kathy. "Thank you," the woman whispered, peering out from behind the child's shoulder. "Thank you, Robert. You're welcome." "Thank you to me," Robert replied. "I did what any father in my position would have done. And if I had been a good father, I would have been there for you from the beginning and wouldn't have let anything like this happen. Kathy, will you let me stay with you?" "Forever," again the woman asked in a whisper. "Forever," Robert replied. Kathy continued to hold her son with one hand and held out the other to the man. He stepped quickly, enclosing his family in an embrace. For a long time they still stood, embraced, the three of them. Family. The next day, Kathy and Robert went to the police station. There, Kathy, under the guidance of Martin, wrote a report of child abduction. And as she finished writing, the woman looked up at her spouse's friend. "And what will happen to them now?" "With Alex and his wife, they'll go to jail. Of course they'll go to jail. They'll go to jail. I promise you that. They'll go to jail for the maximum time allowed under this article. Alex, it's not clear with Jenna right now. Maybe she'll get a reprieve until the kids grow up. But I'll do my best to make sure that doesn't happen. What's going to happen to the kids? Where are they going to go? And if Jenna goes down, do they go to an orphanage? No, they won't." This Jenna turned out to be a pretty young mom. She got the call, and she's on her way to take the kids in. But if you look at it this way, when the grandmother raised her daughter in her own image, maybe the kids would have been better off in an orphanage. Who knows?
Subscribe and click the bell.
Camille was often home alone. She was so tired of it that she wanted someone to be there for her. Her mother was always at the office. She worked as a bookkeeper for the village council, so she often stayed late. "Camille, are you asleep? Did a woman come in the house?" "No," she came out of her room. "Then let's have dinner." She put the groceries from her bag on the table. "Okay. Why did you take so long again today?" "Look, that's what I get paid for. I need to make sure there are no mistakes." The woman didn't like the subject. Good. Her daughter agreed with her. They ate and then went to bed. In the morning, the girls had to go to school, and the mother had to get up for work again. "Hello." Stephen met her on the way. "Hello. Camille. I liked him. How are you?" He picked up the girl's briefcase. "Fine." She was coloring. "We'll go out tonight?" he asked simply. "Okay." They were already approaching the school porch. "But what did he say to you?" Evelyn's best friend came up to her. "Nothing." She was still staring at the guy's back. "Well, Camille, tell me, it was interesting. Is it okay that we're going out tonight?" The girl confessed. "Did you say yes to that?" Evelyn was sure that Camille would torment him for a long time. "How much longer?" "School will be over soon. He'll just leave, and I'll be left with my pride." She was sure of it. "Look at you. Anybody could take you." She was sure of it. "Thank you for the compliment, of course. But I wish it was Stephen." She blushed again. They went to class, and lessons began. But Camille didn't care about them. She thought only of the young man. The class dragged on slowly. It was boring. Finally, everything was over. The girl went out into the schoolyard, but Stephen was not there waiting. Caught up with her Camille. "Leave me alone." Could not bear to be under the floorboards of her friend Camille any longer. She went home for lunch and decided to do her homework. She couldn't think of anything to do. She looked out the window every now and then. When it was 6:00 p.m., he came. At first, Camille wanted to run out to meet him, but after a moment she thought that would be rash. Sitting back down on the table, there was a knock on the window. Camille looked out, smiled, and shook her head to indicate that she was about to come out. "Hi." He was grinning from ear to ear. "Why so happy?" Though shy, she spoke confidently. "I saw you." He didn't hide the fact that he liked the girl. "Let's go." She smiled and pulled him by the hand. They went to the riverbank. It was a favorite place for all young people, but Stephen and Camille did not want anyone to see them. They decided to go further to the fisherman's cottage, which had long been abandoned. "Come here." He gave her a hand so she wouldn't fall through on the bridge, where the boards were already cursed. "Thank you." She jumped to the ground and fell right into his arms. Now he went to the doors and tried to open them, but nothing worked. Then Stephen took a piece of iron that was lying here on the ground, slipped it under the boards, piled on, and the door held nothing. Camille could only say. They stepped inside. The place smelled of musty netting. There were old nets around, dirty rags, some kind of mattress. "Come here," the boy beckoned her. They laid that very mattress against the wall with another flake thrown on it. They made themselves comfortable. Across from where they sat there was a small window that overlooked part of the trees and the sky. Beautiful. Camille sat in Stephen's arms. "Like you," he whispered in her ear. "What?" She laughed and turned to him. "You're beautiful." He touched her hair that had gotten out of its ponytail. Their faces were very close together. Stephen couldn't help himself. He kissed Camille. "You what?" She got away from him and blushed. "I love you." He held her hands. "What are you saying? What kind of love can there be at our age?" She said it. She didn't want him to let her go. "Come to me." He pressed down on her chest again. She could smell him. She liked him. Stephen stroked her head, her back, her neck. They were nice touches. He leaned in, kissed her. First on her temple, then on her shoulder, then down to her neck. Camille froze. The guy just stroked her and kissed her. "I can't." She made him do it. What was he like coming to his senses? She turned on her back, planted her lips on his. Stephen leaned into her. It was an unusual feeling. The young people gave in to an impulse of tenderness. They were both inexperienced and did everything out of inertia. "I will never leave you," he whispered to her. "I love you," she answered him. They lay like that on the old mattress for a long time. Stephen held her in his arms. Camille drowned in those arms. It was time to go home. He kissed her. Yes. She stood up and looked at him and smiled. They walked out of the cabin, closing the door to make it look like it was like that. Stephen walked along with Camille to her house until he came close to her and said, "This is Stephen's hair." She hugged him until tomorrow. He kissed her on the cheek as if he was afraid someone would see. Camille walked into the house. She couldn't believe all that had happened. Her body was burning. She could still remember kissing Stephen. What were you looking at her like that for? Emily. What girl didn't understand? "I don't know." The woman shrugged. "You don't know, but you ask." The girl was embarrassed. It seemed to her that everyone could see and understand what had happened to her today. She lay on the bed and thought about her boyfriend, and she had never felt so good before. She thought it was for life. Now they would graduate from high school, and a whole different life would begin. Stephen would be the master of their family and home. "Hi." He caught up with her the next day on her way to school. "Hello." She came up to him. But the guy didn't hug her for some reason. Later, he looked around again. "I feel like you're embarrassed of me." She was offended. "What are you saying?" He took her hand. They walked to the school. Stephen went back to his friends, and Camille stayed standing by the porch. "Hi." Evelyn came up behind her. Scared her, her friend turned to her. "Why are you cursing like that? Am I so scary?" The girl laughed. "Oh, Evelyn, don't start." Camille looked at where her lover was standing. "What's wrong with him?" The girlfriend was also looking in the same direction as Camille. "Look at him. Isn't he handsome?" She said it with fondness. "Girlfriend, I see we've lost you. You're gone." "You've made your point, Evelyn." The bell rang and all the boys entered the school building. In class, they didn't want to think about anything but the young man. Camille remembered her feelings from the day before. It had been inexpressible. When the lessons were over, she hurried towards the exit. She didn't want the boy to leave without her. But she didn't have time, because Stephen was nowhere to be found. That skittered away already laughed by her friend behind her back. "Evelyn, leave me alone." It hurt Camille that he did not wait for her, and she found home alone. But when she had only a few meters to go, She heard someone calling her. "Why are you hiding here?" She came to the bushes. Where did Stephen call her from? "I'm not hiding from you. I'm waiting." He seemed offended. So there she was. She's in front of him. "You come here." He beckoned her to him. Now Camille looked around, and York to where her boyfriend was. "To what you're looking back," he laughed. "Shut up." She blushed again. Yes, she realized now what she was so embarrassed about, Stephen. The village was small. Everyone knew each other. There was no need for anyone to tell her mother about them. "Come on." He winked at her. "Okay. Let's at least leave the bags at home." She looked at her large briefcase. Okay. They walked down the path that led to the girl's house. There they ditched, "I'll show you," and headed to the house where they'd spent time yesterday. "Sorry." He tucked a strand behind her ear as they lay back on the same mattress. It was okay. She loved being around him so much. That's how it would always be. "Would you like to be my wife?" the young man asked. He leaned back. "Would you take it?" She doubted it. First of all, it was still short summer. And secondly, they had only been dating for a couple of days. Why not? Here graduated from school, went somewhere, and then you can think about marriage. He spoke dreamily. Camille realized that it would happen, but not so soon. So she forbade herself to think about it. He turned to her and embraced her. She brought her face close to his. "You're so beautiful." He began to kiss her. "I love you." She responded to those kisses. Again today, they spent the whole day in their private place. Camille was free to come and go from the house. No one knew where or with whom she was. Her mother, as always, was very busy, so the daughter did what she wanted. But until tomorrow. They said goodbye at the gate. The mother entered the girl's house, but there was silence in return. They started going out with Stephen. No girlfriends, walks and discos Camille didn't need anymore. She wanted to be only with him. She saw nothing else. "Why don't you get up?" Their mother came to them in the morning. "I can't. I feel sick," Camille answered. "I see something very pale." Emily touched her head. "I'm not going." For school today, Camille bowed her head off the bed. She spun around nicely, petted her mother. The woman left and Camille remained lying in the bed. It was a pity only one thing she would not meet Stephen. But the girl was wrong. Already in the afternoon, he was outside her house. Camille shouted to him at the gate. She heard, but could not even get up to open to him. The guy did not hesitate, stuck his hand in the hole, pulled the deadbolt, and entered the yard unhindered. "You're home." He was already in the kitchen. "Come in." He heard from the room where the girl was lying. "What's wrong?" Did he see that she didn't say hello? "I don't know." She lay on her back, but at that moment a fit of nausea came up to her throat again. "To sit with you," he came closer, and if you don't mind me saying so, it was immediately different with him. The nausea receded a little, even the poverty was gone. He sat down on the edge of the bed, took Camille's hand in his. It was cold. "Why are you all friendly?" He was worried about her. "I can't say." She looked up at him. Maybe the doctor's. Was he ready to run to the nurse's station? "No, don't. It'll get worse." "I'll go myself." She stopped him. So they sat there until the evening. The girl felt better. She even got up. They drank tea. "I have to go." Stephen hugged the girl. Camille continued to study. Sometimes she felt as bad as that time. "Don't you think you eat too much?" The other night she asked Emily, "Mom, are you going to reproach me with food?" I couldn't believe it, could you? No, look at the way she did it. The woman pointed to her waist area. Camille noticed it herself. Her favorite skirts and dresses didn't fit her. She was nervous about it, but she put it down to the fact that she had been eating more lately. "And you are ready, not so tasty." The girl laughed. "That's what you said." Mom smiled affectionately at her daughter. But by spring it became noticeable that this fullness is not just for nothing. "Come here." Her mother called her then. What Camille came up to her. The woman pulled up the dress her daughter was wearing. Not for nothing the neighbor told me that Emily clutched her head. Mom, what were you looking at? At her and your belly. Are you stupid? You don't understand anything. She pointed her finger. No. Why? Camille began to suspect something wrong, but she was afraid to even think about it. You're pregnant. Where did she go out? The woman asked. Mommy. The girl cried. She sat down on the stool that stood next to her. What, Mom? Hugged her daughter and cried. Emily Stephen. Camille did not look at her, seeing him here. What a bunch of students. The woman was indignant. Now a girl came out of the house. I don't understand what happened. She dragged Stephen by the hand to her house. You'll understand now. Camille was angry with him. Well, Vitek, what shall we do? The woman stood by the feathers with her hands at her sides. What am I to you, Vitek? That looked at Camille, and he was scared. And who else? Are you going to have a child soon? She pointed at her daughter that he sat down and covered his eyes with his hands. How am I going to face the neighbors now? They will say that with my work I have abandoned my daughter. The woman screamed. I don't know how it could have happened. Stephen was confused. He didn't know where to look. But I know how to hit on girls, so he knows. But how do you answer for it? She didn't finish. What do we do now? The guy was talking to Camille's mom. It's like it never happened. What do we do? Do what? Play the wedding, Emily said firmly. But we're still in school. He went back to doing whatever it was he was doing. So school was not brought up. The woman went to her room. How? He whispered to Camille silently. She was shocked by everything that was happening. It was necessary to inform her parents. But how to do it? The guy had absolutely no idea. He didn't want to go home that day. But he didn't have to say anything to anyone. When Stephen entered the house, his mother and father were sitting in the kitchen waiting for him. Did you already know? The boy guessed. How could you? All his life broke in girls, and himself mother was determined. But now she could not resist and cried. That's enough. What are you all talking about? I'll take her as my wife, and we'll have a baby. It'll be a real family. He wanted to go to his room, but his father stopped him. Where will you live? He held his son's hand. We'll figure it out. I didn't want to talk about it. The boy. We'll figure it out. He exhaled a man's breath. From that day on, the whole village did nothing but talk about the case. Each time the news got more and more interesting. Camille was already pregnant, not by Stephen, but by someone unknown. And he just took pity on her, took her under his wing. The girl's mother agreed with the chairman, and he agreed to marry the young people. It so happened that at the graduation stood no longer a guy and a girl, but a husband and wife. Will you live here? Strictly said Camille's mother. It was better for the girl then. I'll go. I'll try to get a job, said Stephen. All plans to study in the city and move there were put off. Or maybe they weren't meant to come true. At first, the guy pretended to be a family man. A healthy girl was born, whom the parents named Jenna. Husband brought money into the family to take care of his daughter. But when he got the summons, his joy and zeal diminished. How could it be? Camille wondered. How can I be alone? She cried every day. But there was nothing they could do about it. Stephen went into the service. Will it be hard? Emily told her. I realized that myself. Camille was afraid to be alone. But her parents, Stephen and her mother, helped her with everything. Jenna was an active child. She was always busy. Camille looked at her and realized that she was still a child herself, but she already had her own. She wrote letters to her husband in the army. He answered, but unlike Camille, he rarely did. He came back. His daughter was over 2 years old. Didn't recognize her at first. Stephen, how long has it been since we've seen each other? Camille pressed them to him. But all that tenderness, he turned his back on her. When he came to the army, he saw that it was possible to live differently from the village. Now he wanted something different. He regretted the way things had turned out between him and Camille. And if he could turn back the clock now, he wouldn't look at her at all. Stop sitting here, his mother-in-law told him. I want to sit here. He poured himself another shot. My wife and child missed you here. And there you are. Emily stood and fed him. I need to get used to it, he said, and realized that he had no feelings for his wife anymore. What was that about? The mother didn't understand. To everything snapped at the young man. Oh, everything is clear with you. Do not need it, will be brave. Get up. Leave. She went to the room where her granddaughter was sleeping. And that's what I'll do. Stephen sneered. He got up from the stool, staggered, took his papers and left the house. Mom, where's Stephen? Camille came back from the store. Gone quietly, said Ta didn't understand. It was the girl's turn to be surprised. He said he needed to get used to you. I showed him the door. The woman was minding her own business. How could you do that? Camille cried. Don't cry. You don't deserve to cry for him. He spoiled a girl, gave birth to a child, and then he went to the bushes. I guess he didn't like it. Emily came up and hugged her daughter. What about us? She didn't understand. Tears rolled from her eyes. It's okay. You're still young. You'll find a groom. She wiped her daughter's tears. The paperwork had to be done. When 6 months passed and Stephen never came back, Camille decided to divorce him. Mom helped with everything. I wondered, why had Stephen's parents stopped communicating with their ex-daughter-in-law and granddaughter? But no one asked them that. Well, guess what? One evening, Mom and daughter were sitting at the table, and Jenna ran the same look at the woman Camille. Why don't you go to the city, get an education, get a job? Maybe you're looking for a normal husband. Emily reasoned. What about Jenna? She looked at her daughter. Why doesn't she stay with me for a while? And how are you going to do that? You'll come back for her right away. The grandmother bent down and took her granddaughter in her arms. Well, I thought about it too, but I didn't dare to tell you. I thought maybe you wouldn't agree. Camille hugged her mom. Once we talked about it, that was the end of it. Camille gathered all her papers and went to conquer the city. Everything was new there. Not often had to get out of the village. The girl applied, enrolled. She was provided with a dormitory, moved in. When she lived with her mother and daughter, she did not think that there was such a strong connection between them. And now, when she was alone in a strange city, she felt the lack of relatives. Just because she was so sad, her roommate Wendy came over to her. I miss my daughter. She put a picture on the table. Wow, such a young and already so big daughter. The girl was surprised. Yes, but I don't regret anything. Camille stroked the image of Inga, not sad. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices. The neighbor gave wise advice. I'm trying. She stood up, went to the light switch to turn off the light. Studying wasn't hard. Camille did it with pleasure. She was preparing for the subject, snapping the tasks like peanuts. By the end of the session, there was almost no need to take exams. Everything was put by automatic. Home for the holidays? Wendy asked. Yes, she missed you very much. I can't wait to see you. Camille wanted to go shopping for a doll for her daughter, and then go. I'll see you later. They hugged each other. There were a lot of people in the store. Everyone wanted to please the children on this fabulous holiday. Sorry, Camille felt like she stepped on someone's foot. A man had just cleaned his shoes and was looking at them. I didn't do it on purpose. Camille really didn't mean it. She pulled a handkerchief out of her pocket. I wanted to get my mark off the victim's shoe. You what? He grabbed her arm. I'm sorry again. The girl couldn't find other words. Let's go. He took her to the place where there were the least people. Why? She didn't understand what this man wanted from her. Now he sat down and rubbed his shoes with some kind of cloth a couple of times, and everything was as it had been before. I should probably go. I saw Camille. There weren't so many customers at the register. Wait, I'll come with you. And he went up. Okay. She was already headed that way. My name is Christopher. Camille heard about you from behind. Camille. She didn't turn around. Buy a doll for your sister. He pointed to the beautiful toy in the girl's hands. My daughter is waiting for me for the holidays at her grandmother's. She did not begin to sly. She didn't go on with anything. Christopher, he was buying something too. And when he went outside, saw Camille crossing the street, caught up with her. "Can I walk you out?" He walked beside her. "I think you already do." She smiled. Camille thought to herself, is it so easy to step on a man's foot in a store, and in the next moment you had already made an acquaintance? She liked Christopher. He was solid in a coat with a briefcase and an umbrella. "You're going somewhere." He was looking at the big bag in her hand. "Yes, I live in the country and now I'm studying here. For the holidays I decided to visit my mother and daughter," Camille said casually. "Let me help you." He held out his hand to take the bag. "Thank you." She was really grateful because the luggage was heavy. They reached the train station, stopped. "Camille, I'll see you again." He'd like that very much. "Why not?" She saw her bus pulling up. "Then tell me where you live in the city, and I'll be sure to come." He looked in the same direction as her. "Yes," she nodded and dictated the address to him. Before meeting, he stood looking at her through the glass of the bus, till with only one lip the girl spoke. On the road she looked at, glimpsed trees, but did not see them. She thought about her new acquaintance. Finally, the familiar outline of houses appeared ahead. A smile appeared on the girl's face. She imagined how Jenna would greet her now. She got off the bus and headed towards her house. Everything was familiar here. Camille greeted the locals along the way. She was already at her gate when she saw Stephen. "Hi." He came up to her. "What are you doing here?" She didn't feel like talking to this man. "I wanted to ask how you were doing." The girl could see he was drunk. She pushed him a little and went through the gate. He didn't dare follow her. "Daughter." "Hi." She's out on the porch. "Emily, why did you come out here to meet me on purpose?" "You couldn't figure out Camille." "No, I thought your ex-husband was gonna fight again." She pointed to the gate. "Isn't this the first time?" The girl was very surprised why no one had told her about it before. "Yes, I'm sorry I didn't tell you." The mother entered the house, waiting for her daughter to catch up with her. What does he want here? All sorts of thoughts about the baby and everything else immediately began to pop into her head. Nothing to drink or money for a bottle. She heard the answer to her question. Wow. Camille stood up and froze. There was no telling how long she would stand like that, and what she would think about. Mom came out of the room. Hurricane Jenna High hugged her. "What took you so long?" The girl clutched at her mother's neck. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but we'll be together soon." She knew she would be. "Okay, granddaughter, let mommy pass." Her grandmother took her in her arms. "I missed you so much." Camille looked at her mother. "Yes, let's go to the table." They all sat there together. "So, are you ready for the party?" Leaning over to the baby, Camille. "No, we don't even have a Christmas tree." The little girl said sadly. "That's okay. We'll find one today." Her mom kissed her. Yay, started jumping around the kitchen. As Camille had promised, she bought a small Christmas tree. They set it up in the room, decorated it with toys, and now the holiday felt real. And the presents, looking under the tree. "Girl, wait. Santa Claus hasn't gotten to our house yet." Camille laughed. Overnight, she prepared everything, packed everything nicely, and tomorrow. As soon as they sat down at the table, she would put it all under the holiday tree. Everything went just as Camille had planned. Her daughter was so excited about the doll that she did not sit at the table at all. And when the women came into the room, they only smiled when they saw her sleeping again with the toy in her arms. "But how are you doing in town?" asked Emily. Finally, they could talk amongst themselves. "It's fine. There really wasn't much to tell." She didn't want to talk about the latest acquaintances because nothing was clear. "Okay, when you want to say something, don't be shy." They raised their glasses, congratulated each other, had a drink after the sit-down, put the dishes away and went to their room. "Well, it was time for me to go to school again. Camille has been home for a week. May all be well." Mother and daughter hugged her. "I will miss you very, very much." The girl cried. Just like me, Camille did not want to cry, but one tear traitorously slipped down her cheek. That's it. Emily took her hand and went to escort her to the gate, while the girl headed towards the station. Back at the dormitory, everything was the same as before. Nothing had changed in the week they hadn't been there. They had to start studying again. Camille, there's someone here to see you. One of the students came into her room. Thank you. She wondered who it could be. When the girl came downstairs, she saw Christopher, as she expected. Today he was wearing a tracksuit, which looked very young for a young man. Yes, young. It was the first time Camille had seen him in an overcoat and thought he was a man. Hello, she went up to him. I couldn't wait for all these holidays to be over. He looked up. The janitor was standing there watching them. He gave Camille his hand and looked toward the exit. The girl understood immediately. She said that she had to change her clothes, and in a minute she would be outside. That was the deal. Where are you going? Wendy stood looking at her. Camille didn't usually leave the dormitory at all. I'll tell you all about it later. The roommate was embarrassed. She grabbed her jacket, put on her shoes, and walked out into the hallway. Christopher stood on the porch. Well, that's it. I'm ready. She walked up to him. I'm really excited about this. He looked her over from head to toe. They walked just down the street. When they reached a bench that stood in the shade of a tree, they decided to sit down and talk. I can't explain it, but there in the store, when you stepped on my foot, I liked you right away, Christopher began to tell her. Of course, I can't say that. Then was very much frightened. She did not look at him, but later I can say that she also paid attention. They were sitting like two schoolboys who couldn't admit their feelings for each other. On the one hand, it was funny, but on the other hand, it was only the second time they had seen each other. Let's go to the movies tomorrow, asked her. Okay. Camille was thinking about something. How long have you been a student here? I wanted to know more about her. 6 months. For some reason, she felt embarrassed by that answer. Why do you answer like that? He couldn't understand. A lot of people in my class say I'm a late enrollee, but I think it's never too late to study. Camille pulled some kind of wrapper out of her pocket and now cupped it in her hands. Why are you even thinking about this? When you got in, you got in. Maybe you didn't get the education you wanted, and now to re-educate yourself. He didn't understand what the problem was. They chatted some more, walked around town, and Christopher went to see her off. Because Camille said there was something else to prepare for school. Don't forget about the movie, he told her on the porch. Sure enough, she walked into the dorm. Cheeks burning, she went up to her room. Tell me you're on a date. Wendy sat her down right away. Yeah, on a date, she told her cryptically. So, who is he? Where did you two meet? The neighbor was curious about everything. Camille told her how they had bumped into each other in the store, and after that Christopher had already recognized her. Wow, what a way to go. Some people go to bars, restaurants, clubs, and can't meet anyone. And you just stepped in the store. She laughed on his foot. Oh, Wendy, don't be silly. We don't know anything yet. Camille didn't want to rush things as usual. Christopher came every day. It was very pleasant. He was smart. Camille liked to talk to him about different subjects. By the time the warmth came, the girl was planning to go to her village again because there were long holidays ahead. Are you sure you don't want to take me with you? Christopher asked her. Do you really want to? She didn't know what to do or how to be. You know, I'm that kind of person. If I do something, I do it thoroughly. If I choose you, I want it once and for life. He took her hands and turned her around to face him. So now do you want to go to my village to meet my mom? She concluded, how smart are you? He kissed her. Okay, let's go. Didn't we agree on a place to meet tomorrow? Camille was very worried. What are you so worried about? Wendy asked her tonight. It's not every day you bring your fiancé to meet your mom, she said. What's the big deal? Well, he's a good guy to meet. Or what are you worried about? My friend didn't understand. How will Jenna take it all? Camille sighed. Yeah, she'll take it fine. A man who's adequate should please the girl. Let him buy her candy. That's all it takes, Wendy advised. All right. Camille adjusted her pillow and lay down. It took her a while to fall asleep because she had different thoughts in her head, but eventually she fell asleep. In the morning, she went to her vapor classes, and after them, she could go to the train station. Camille saw from afar that Christopher was already sitting there, waiting for her. Various thoughts came into her head again as to how she would bring him to the village. What would she tell her mother? After all, she had never told her about any young men, and now she'd come at once with her fiancé. But if she decided to do it, she had to do it. So she approached him from behind. "And I'm waiting for you." He stood up and put his arm around her. "Are you really ready to go to my mom?" She asked him that question again. "Of course I am. Why do you ask every time?" He couldn't understand. They got on the bus and drove down the road, talking a lot. Camille showed him different places she'd been. Beautiful views of the river. There's not much green now, but when it's in full bloom, you'll see how beautiful it will be. She promised him. They were approaching the station when Camille spotted Jenna. For some reason, she got even more excited. Just as they got off the bus, Christopher heard Mommy running towards her girl. "Hi, honey." She sat down and hugged her daughter. "How are you here? Grandma said that there are long holidays ahead, and most likely you will come to us. So we came to meet you." Territory, girl. Suddenly, she stopped and looked at Christopher. "Meet Christopher," her mom told her. "Hi, Uncle Christopher." She held out her hand to him. "Hi," he said to her and took a candy bar out of his pocket. "Oh, thank you. I like that kind of candy," she said. All this time, Camille's mother stood by and watched the scene. Of course, she didn't interfere in her daughter's affairs. She decided that later, when there was time, they would talk privately. "Christopher, I'd like you to meet my mom." She brought him over to a woman. "Nice to meet you." He extended his hand to her, and she shook it. After that, we all went home. For some reason, it was so peaceful. "Emily, I didn't just come here," Christopher said that evening, when they were gathered around the table, "and I realized it." The woman glanced at her daughter. "I like Camille very much, and I would like her to be my wife." He reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a ring. "That's a good one." And he didn't say a word. Camille looked at the gift. "What about Uncle Christopher becoming my daddy? Running around Jenna? Anything's possible." Camille put the stir chain on her finger. They were sitting. Camille put her hand on her head, sitting there, watching, seeing how happy her daughter was. Then she left them at home, went to her friend's house. "You have a good mom," said Christopher Camille. "Yeah," she put the little girl on the stairs. "All right, baby, let's get to know each other." He tickled her. "Yeah." She laughed. This time, the couple could only stay here for 3 days. After that, Camille had to go to school and Christopher to work. "Jenna, Mom will be on vacation now, and we'll come and get you." A young man sat down in front of her. "Yay, and I'll live with you." She was already happy about something that hadn't happened yet. Yes, he looked up at Camille. That's how it worked out. When the girl passed the last exam, they went together again to pick up their daughter. The mother was so very upset. After all, when Camille went to study, she had to quit her job. And now they're leaving her alone. "Don't be upset. You can always come and visit us," hugged her daughter. "Okay." Her mother knew that she would definitely come to visit them many more times. Christopher moved Camille into his apartment. That's where they brought Jenna. They were a complete family now. All they had to do was get their passports stamped. "Are you happy?" Christopher asked her when they had been together for a month. Very much, she hugged him. Time flew by quickly. Camille graduated, got a job. Jenna went to kindergarten. After that, she went to school. Christopher and Camille were happy to have such a beautiful daughter. Yes, a daughter, because Jenna almost immediately started calling Christopher Daddy. He didn't mind it, but he never gave up hope that they would have a child together. Today was the big day, Dad said. In the morning, he would put on his suit. It was me or us, and Jenna was getting the hang of it. Of course you do, but it's not so easy for us either. He sat down in front of his daughter, adjusted her jacket, helped her put on her briefcase. Come on, let's go. Camille joined them. In her hands was a huge bouquet, which consisted of asters and gladiolus. They were on their way to the lineup, which was the first time in the girl's life. Camille was a little worried, and Jenna, on the contrary, everything was interesting. School life is not easy, but it concerns not only children, but also their parents. How are you doing at work? Christopher asked his wife. It's fine. Why do you ask? She demanded pies in the kitchen. You look tired. Did he help make the filling? No, it's fine. Jenna's just a lot of work. And it was true. The kids had so much schoolwork that Mom couldn't keep up at all. Why didn't you say anything? I can help. He'd do anything to make the family happy. Then see what they're doing today. The girl was already in the 4th grade. She was bright, but she still didn't understand a lot of things. Only after deep consideration of the subject did she do the right thing. Well, in their family, it was mutual, each helping the other. Jenna, get up. You're late for the dance, shouted from the kitchen mother. Can I not go today? The girl was in 7th grade. She used to go everywhere without fail, but now she was beginning to exercise. No, that won't do. You're always ready to go out with your girlfriends. You have to try harder here too. Camille came into the room and looked at her daughter. Okay, she got up reluctantly and left like that. Mom, giving her daughter time to change. And Jenna went to the dance class, which she was already tired of. She'd been going there since 1st grade. And now that everyone was older, she didn't want to waste any more time on it. Jenna, where are you going? Her friends met her. She rolled her eyes at the dance. Let's go for a walk. What do you need them for? They talked her into it. Come on, it's okay to skip it once. She looked around as if she was afraid her mother was watching her. They were meeting in one of the courtyards because there was a group of older guys there. They didn't pay any attention to the girls, but they still came to see them every day. Hey, Jenna and her friends walked past the young men. They didn't even turn around. They weren't interested in the kids. Why don't they even look in our direction? Asked Rick, who liked Rick. Because they have other interests, answered Jenna. The girls didn't waste the opportunity. They were in that yard every day. Come here, somehow John called out to Jenna. That she didn't expect to be called. The school year was almost at an end. Only a few days left until vacation. Go on, her friends whispered to her. The girl walked, her legs starting to shake. John was only a few meters away, but she felt like he was miles away from her. When finally Jenna was close by, the guy laughed. Did you call me over for a laugh? She didn't understand. She somehow braved it right away. No, it just shakes like a leaf. He took her hand. I can't help it. Jenna was telling the truth. All right, let's go. There's something to do. He called her over to the others. Hi, she came over. Listen, without greetings began to talk. Guys, we need you to come with us to the disco. Why? The girl realized they had some kind of plan. Our girls decided that we won't find anyone and sewed us up. So we'll show them that we don't care, they explained to her. She turned to her friends at that moment and waved for them to come to them. They were just waiting for that. They were there at the same moment. Jenna recounted everything to them. We agree. They imagined going to the disco with them. How will their classmates be jealous? Then we'll do it on Saturday. We are waiting for you here. John looked at Jenna and smiled. She must have fallen in love with him at that very moment. Jenna, I found out you were skipping the dance. Her mother came to her room. Did your teacher call you? The girl didn't understand. There was one class left until the end of the year, at least for him. Go, the woman asked. And from September, I will not go. She asked the woman. We'll see. Camille avoided answering. On Saturday, the girls had been at Jenna's house practically since lunchtime. They were coloring and picking out what to wear. Man, it doesn't seem too bright. Did Jenna turn to her friends? No, it's fine. They approved of what she'd done. But the girls still cleaned up a little of the makeup with wipes. Finally, they were ready. It was still over 2 o'clock before the event started, so everyone gathered in the same courtyard. Hi, the guys finally came over. They were now chatting like old friends. Let's go. Jenna took a look at John. Aha. He smiled at her. Jenna walked over to him, taking his hand in hers. This was very cool to her. John was in charge of the company, and now she's walking beside him. Why so much makeup? Asked the guy on the way. I knew it. She regretted not cleaning up as much as she wanted. Listen to her friends. Ahead showed the DK where the disco was held. Stephen began to shiver. What if your girls start fighting with us? Asked Jenna. For some reason it only now came to her mind. They won't. And if they do, we're always here for them. He answered her. Good. She trusted that John would be able to handle everything. That night was just as the guys had planned. All the girls were older than Jenna and her friends by only 1 year. As soon as they saw that those came with their friends, they started to talk over each other. When Jenna went outside, they hurried to be there too. You know they're ours, said one of the girls. They were yours, now they're ours. She was not shy, Jenna. They bickered a little longer and then went back into the hall. A slow dance began. John approached Jenna. They danced, and she could see her rival's eyes sparkling. Let's get out of here. Her boyfriend called out to her. What about the girls? She looked at her friends. They can walk on their own. He looked the same way as the girl. Choosing well between the girls and the boyfriend, she favored him. They went outside. It was warm. Jenna took the guy under her arm again. They headed to where the market was during the day. Let's sit here. He beckoned her over to the tray and stood up himself, across the street. Okay. She liked the way he was treating her. You're cool, he touched her. You are too. She was smiling. She felt good right now. What if we start being friends? Did he suggest it? Let's do it. She couldn't believe she was saying that. Come on now, I'll walk you out tomorrow. Come to the courtyard. He gave her a hand to help her climb down from where she was sitting. The next day, as promised, he was waiting for her where they always met. Jenna, are you two really dating? Looked at her surprised by her girlfriends. Yes, he proposed yesterday. She told them. But wow, what kind of guide did she get? Yeah, she looked down on them. But I gotta go. Jenna headed towards John. The girls kept up. They believed that if their girlfriend started hanging out with a guy like that, they might get lucky. Hi. She came up to him. Were you standing there with them for so long? He asked about the girlfriends. Talking about you, she told him honestly. The guy and the girl started a serious relationship. Now they rarely sat in that courtyard as a group. More often John came to pick up Jenna and they went for a walk. Who's that guy coming to see you? Asked her mother one day. His name is John. We have been friends for a couple months now. She blushed when she told her mother that. Why don't you bring a stranger to visit? The woman was afraid because the guy was 5 years older. I do not know, as that time has not come yet. Shrugged his shoulders. Why are you picking on her? Christopher intervened in their conversation. Well, I'm a mother. I need to know who my daughter is socializing with. Camille didn't understand him. Your daughter is 13 years old. Until she is so old that she can choose her suitors, we'll change them more than once, laughed Christopher. It's good for you to reason. You don't worry like I do. She sighed. Camille began to watch her daughter more carefully now. She was afraid that a grown boy might do something. But John was showing good behavior. The girl always came home on time. At school, she studied well. And so after a while, Camille let the situation go. There was a fall ball at school. And of course, there was a disco afterwards. Are you coming? Jenna John asked. And you invite to the school going did not feel like going. But if his girlfriend was going, he should be with her. When they got there in the evening, they saw that the girl with whom the guy used to be friends was also there. Jenna was dancing in a circle with her friends and suddenly felt someone pushing her back. She turned around and saw Vanessa, John's ex. "What do you want?" she asked her. "You shouldn't look at other people's boyfriends and be friends with them." She answered her, "You broke up." "We started to be friends. What's wrong with that, Jenna?" "We didn't break up. I just wanted to teach him a lesson. And you see how it turned out." The girl spoke arrogantly. "Well, who did you teach a lesson?" "You had," Jenna laughing. The situation between them was getting so heated that everything was heading for a fight. "Yeah, screw you," she said. Vanessa and shoved her in the shoulder. She grabbed her by the hair. And that's when the real scuffle started. The girls on Vanessa's side wanted to protect their friend, but the girls who were with Jenna didn't stand still either. John stood aside and only smiled at this. He was amused by it. The whole situation after the teachers who were on duty at the disco separated them. Jenna approached John. "Is it funny to you?" she asked him. "Yeah," he answered. "Fuck you." She turned around and walked toward the exit. "Wait," he followed her. But Jenna didn't want to listen to him anymore. She was shaking with anger, not at the fact that she'd just gotten into a fight, but at having to fight over some guy. She'd never been so down at home before. She let the tears flow. "Daughter, what's wrong?" Mom came running into the room. "Nothing." "Please leave me alone," she asked. "No. I want to know why my daughter is crying." Camille sat down on the edge of the bed. He turned out to be just like everyone else. The girl was crying. "Calm down. There's nothing to suffer for." A woman stroked her head. "Mom, you don't understand." That evening, nothing could help her. Her mother brought her some warm milk, which Jenna drank and went to bed. In the morning, Jenna went to school. After that, she went back home and never went out again. She really didn't feel like going out with John, but when she didn't come to the yard, the guy thought he should go to her himself. He knocked on the door, waiting a long time to be opened. Camille appeared on the doorstep. "Hello. Can I talk to Jenna?" he asked her. "No," answered the mother. Why didn't he understand? "You hurt her badly yesterday, and she doesn't want to communicate with you today," said the woman. "Since I hurt her, I just didn't want to get involved in the fight, that's all." He looked inside the apartment, but he didn't see Jenna there. "Did she tell you that you two broke up?" Camille looked at the guy carefully. "Just call her, and that's all." The young man insisted. "Okay." She went to the room where Jenna was, told her everything. The girl went out onto the landing and closed the door behind her. "Why are you doing this?" asked her John. "You can all go to your Vanessa, we are not together anymore," she answered. He was sad to hear that, but there was nothing to do. So John just left. They broke up. Jenna suffered. But soon the study process, dance class, and everything else overshadowed her sadness. She still went out with the girls. John once tried to approach her at the disco, but she did not want to be with him. And then he disappeared from the city. Nobody saw him or knew where he was. "Shall we go to the store?" Christopher looked at his daughter. Yes, she nodded her head. Jenna was graduating from 11th grade, so she needed to buy a nice dress and shoes. "Oh, I can't even believe school is behind us," Camille said to her daughter. "I can't believe it myself," Jenna admitted honestly. "Okay, enough about that. Let's pick out a dress," showed Christopher the outfits of beautiful evening gowns. And Jenna did nothing but change dresses and spin around in front of the mirror. They all looked good on her, but she chose the one she thought was the prettiest. At graduation, they stood all together. Teachers and the principal congratulated them and said farewell words. After that, they moved to the hall, where the tables were already set. When the fun was in full swing, her friend pushed Jenna in the side. She looked up and saw John heading toward them. "Can I talk to you?" Did he approach the girls? "No," she said, and turned away. She didn't feel like talking to him or seeing him at all. "Why don't you want to talk to me?" I don't understand why things didn't work out with you the other day. He wouldn't leave. He insisted. Okay, let's go. Jenna left the table and walked with John towards the exit. She didn't want to get into an argument in front of everyone. Outside, he clarified. Yes, she nodded, and they walked out of the school. Tell me, why aren't we together? He asked. What do you mean? It's been so many years, and you show up and ask me why we're not together. She was very surprised. All this time I remembered you. I wanted us to be together. He wanted to hug the girl. I was forgotten to ask. She didn't look at the guy. Give me a chance, he asked. Come back tomorrow. Maybe something will work out. She went back to where everyone else was. But John didn't wait until tomorrow. He saw all the seniors getting on the bus. He knew where they were going. There was a sunrise reunion ahead. Jenna approached him from behind. God, why scare her like that? She turned to him. I love you and I want to be with you. He put his arms around the girl. At that moment, she settled in. It was so beautiful. The dawn was just beginning. And here he is, confessing his love. Okay, let's try again. She smiled. John didn't say anything. He kissed her shoulder, then her neck. Mom, I'm home. She came the next day. Good, you took a walk. She saw that her daughter's makeup was a little smeared. What's your look? She was pointing at her face. I need to tell you something. Jenna walked to the room and started to change her clothes. Something serious tensed the woman. John and I are back together. Didn't turn around, she would. Why do you want him? Do you know what I heard about him? Camille couldn't believe it. They say you can't walk into the same river twice. You know, unless you step on your own toes, you'll never get anywhere. My daughter was in her pajamas. She was gonna get some sleep. Christopher, can you believe they're back together? The wife went into the other room and told the husband to stay out of it. Things can happen fast now, he warned her. You know what my friend told me about him. She sat down next to me. And what was it? He was ready to listen. He uses not only alcohol, but also many other things, whispered Camille. Oh, it's all your gossip. Christopher didn't believe it. Well, we'll see what happens. Camille wanted her daughter to be happy. She had to enroll, but because of the meetings with her boyfriend, she didn't want to leave this town. So let's go together. He suggested it to her. Are you serious? She was so excited. She was ready to go anywhere. They lived together. John did drink a lot, bringing strange people home with him. Jenna didn't like it, but she kept quiet because she loved John and didn't want to fight with him. Where are you going at night? She asked him as he was about to leave. It's none of your business. He'd leave, come back in the morning. And when Jenna pressed him for explanations, he'd lie to her. Sometimes the girl complained to her mother. She'd cry, told her to leave him. But Jenna couldn't. She loved the man so much that she stayed with him. If she kept on like this, it wouldn't be long before they broke up. Warned Jenna. John, come on. He was hugging the girl. You'll see. Jenna threatened him with her finger. John was afraid that the girl would leave him. After all, the apartment they lived in was rented by her father. So after they fought, the guy did everything he could to make up. So John decided to relax a little. Went to a bar that was close to the house. He went to the bar. There was another young man sitting there. Can I have a drink? John asked the bartender. Sure, he replied. What's bad too? Asked the one who was sitting there. I don't get it. John motioned to him. Robert. The stranger held out his hand. John answered the man. Nice to meet you. The young man was dressed normally. He sat and just drank. At that moment, John was poured a drink. He raised the shot, looked at the new acquaintance. Here's to us, Robert said. They started talking all the while and drinking. What's the matter with you? Asked John to the young man. Oh, it's a long story. The one wrinkled his nose and brushed it off. It's hard if you're sitting here alone pouring. I looked at the counter, where one glass after another was put out. Very exhaled that tell. I was ready to listen and support, almost a friend. and what to tell. We lived normally, and then it began. He took the glass again. With his wife, John said, "Aha." He looked away, and more people came into the bar. What changed? The guy was getting the words out of Robert. I was an ordinary guy then. I studied at the Institute. I knew and could do a lot of things. Robert began his story. I see. Prepared to listen to John. Molly came to pick up some documents. She and I bumped into each other in the hallway, and her hand fell out of hers. I sat down, started helping her, picking it up. One of the forms said something about oil deposits. I was surprised, I asked. At that moment, Robert stopped talking. He decided to wet his throat again. Wow, were they oil tycoons? John was all ears now. You could say that. But I didn't know that at the time. I'd only seen the papers. Our institute specialized in this subject. So I was interested. I started telling what I knew. And Molly walked and smiled. As it turned out, she only works with documentation and doesn't understand anything about it. Robert shook his head. Wow, it's like a fairy tale. John looked at his new acquaintance fascinated. That's what I thought at the time. I met him and asked him out on a date. I don't know who liked me better, her father or herself. But from that moment on, I was part of their family. As if he remembered something, he curved his lips. Why the father? Didn't understand. He was sick of his work. Once he got a half-empty well, as many people thought. But he developed it, dug near it. Turned out there was oil. He's been in business ever since. I knew a lot about the subject. We talked to him for hours a day. And then he told his daughter I was the perfect man to marry. Heavy, Robert sighed. And you got married? John guessed. Yes, we started living together. I worked with my father. I thought Molly and I were made for each other and would always be together. We'd never be apart. And she did this to me. He took another sip. What did she do now? It was a very interesting story. While I was just a simple guy, she loved me. And then things changed. We started working. I started having money. We built a house, bought everything we needed. One day I came home and there she was with our driver, making out. It looked like Robert was about to cry. Wow. The new buddy shook his head. That's what I thought, too, and I asked her to come to her senses and come back. And she said I was just like her father. So 7 years of our marriage went down the drain. He took the glass and drank it all down. They exchanged phone numbers. Robert promised to keep in touch with him and to get him a job, since Robert had had enough. He got ready to go home. John volunteered to walk him home, but it turned out he had a car waiting for him. That's it. I'll call you tomorrow, he said to his new friend when he got home, and told Jenna nothing. She looked at her husband, who was wobbling from side to side, and started talking to him and figuring things out. Just went to bed. And John sat there thinking of ways to get money out of the new buddy. I'm going to school. She told him to get dressed in the morning and left. Didn't even know if he heard or not. The couple's relationship was very strained. Jenna was even beginning to think that her mom was right when she told her about this guy not being right for her. Hi. That's when John dialed Robert's number. Hello, he remembered who was calling him. You promised to think about getting me a job, the young man reminded him. Yes, he only agreed because he always kept his promises. Come to my office. John was very happy. He'd walk, and on the way he'd think of something to catch on to. And then he'd think of something. Hi. He was greeted by a well-dressed man. Hello. For some reason, John got excited. I've got something for you. He opened the door for him. Okay, thanks. He tried to be polite. They sat there, had a long talk. And at the end, Robert said he was taking John into production as a technician. It was a happy thing. They said goodbye, and John went home. Jenna, I got a job, he told the girl. I congratulate you, she said cheerlessly. Why so sluggish? He stood up and walked over to her. Don't. She didn't want anything from him anymore. All right. Don't be sorry." And he left the house again. Jenna breathed a sigh of relief. She didn't know what to do with this relationship. It was stressing her out. John went to work. He asked his supervisor to walk with him. It was for a reason. He wanted everyone to see who brought him here. "This is where you'll be working," Robert showed me. "All right. Who's gonna explain everything to me?" "Just ask the new employee. You ask the guys." He pointed to the crew. "Thank you." They shook hands and Robert went to his room. "All right, guys, let me get this straight." John wanted to understand the principle of what was gonna be done. They started showing him one thing after another. Everything was easy and clear. Now he started coming here every day. But not much time had passed when the young man began to get more and more discouraged. "So you do this and you do that," he commanded. "Why would I do that? You're the one who should be doing it." The other workers resented it. "You want me to tell you what you're really doing here?" He called the boss that on purpose to show how close friends they were. The guys were afraid of losing their jobs, so they did what they were told. In the evening, John would go straight to the boss's office. "How about a Scotch bar?" He'd sit in the chair. "You know, I'm a little busy tonight." He didn't know how to tell the guy to leave. "I saw your workers taking something off the property today," John said, as if in passing. What exactly did the supervisor tense up about? He often saw that there were fewer new parts than there should have been. "I don't know, but they were still talking about it afterward. I realized I'd hit a nerve, young man." "I see. Can you show me who it is?" Got up from the table, Robert. "Sure," agreed the boy. Maybe the guys did take something off the property. Nobody knew that. But when John pointed them out and they were punished, now they were avoiding him. "Remember when you asked me to go to the bar? You met Robert John after work." "Yeah." He was waiting for the boss to call him. "It's okay today." He pointed to the car. John slowed down on purpose. He wanted more workers to get out of the factory, and then ostentatiously got into his friend's car. "But something even where we met." Robert looked at him. "Come on." John didn't care where they went, as long as they got close to the money. He'd been getting a paycheck for a long time, and he hadn't done anything. As soon as he complained about someone or said something that would implicate the employees, Robert would punish or fire them. "Congratulations to you." The boss raised his glass. "On what?" "Excuse me, comrade." "With the fact that we work together," he smiled. "Come on." They clinked glasses and drank. After that, the friends sat, chatted about many things, and then decided to disperse. When the next day everyone came to the production, then many were summoned to the director. Some he fired, others reprimanded. "Why should we keep silent?" Asked in the corridor, one asked the other. "Exactly. We've already been fired. What's the use of hiding?" The man rushed back into the office. "We've already cleared this up." Robert looked at us. "No, we have a statement," they said firmly. "Speak up." The warden was ready to listen. "Do you know what your protege does all day?" asked one of them. "You mean John?" I couldn't understand, Robert. "He's the one they confirmed." "What does he do?" I wanted to hear what the workers had to say. "He walks around, commands, does nothing, makes us do nothing, and then tells you things that didn't happen." The man was shooting like a machine gun. "I don't believe you. John is a good man." The chief did not believe them. "But you follow him and see for yourself." The men advised him and left the office, not understanding anything. Robert looked out the window. In the evening, he called his friend again for a sit-down. Of course, he wouldn't tell him anything, but he wanted to see how and what he was doing. "Let's go to my place, and I'll introduce you to my girlfriend." John said, "Oh, not today. I didn't want you to look like that." "Robert, what are you talking about? Come on." The guy gave me his hand. "Okay." Robert couldn't say no to him again. They got in the car and drove to John's house, stopped, walked to the driveway. Sure to be comfortable. Robert was worried. He didn't want to disturb people. "It's fine," John assured him. They entered the apartment. Jenna was surprised. I wanted to kick her out at first, but when I saw Robert, I knew he wouldn't sit with her boyfriend until morning. Hello, he said hello. Repeated after John's boss. Come on in. She pointed toward the kitchen. Why not the room? Or did you not clean up again? Started stepping on it. That never happened. That's why Jenna's face stretched out. Why would you do that? The guest looked at him judgmentally. She didn't deserve it any other way, John assured him. Let's go. Robert was ashamed, although these words were not spoken by him. The host placed a table in front of the sofa. They sat down. Jenna started carrying snacks from the kitchen and whatever John asked for. Thank you. Robert liked the girl. She didn't say anything, just walked back and forth. Have a seat with us, he asked her. No, thank you. She looked at him. Don't you get it? Shouted John. Why are you doing this? Do you want to seem cool or the master of life? Robert didn't understand. And that she refuses when respectable people ask. He shrugged as if he had nothing to do with it. If you don't want to, you don't have to do it. After these words and left for the kitchen. And I now said John and went after her. What she turned to him as he entered the kitchen and closed the door. It's okay what you've done here, hissed he. How could Jenna not realize what had happened to him? And that's the man I need. Got it. So you're going to come and sit with us like a sweetheart now. John grabbed her arm. I'm not going anywhere. The girl wanted to get free, but she couldn't move. I thought you'd sleep with him if I wanted you to. He squeezed her hand harder. Shrieked in pain, Jenna. What's going on here? Robert came into the kitchen. Fuck off. What's the boss doing here? I'm sorry. He pulled himself together. He let go of Jenna's hand. Robert saw that there was a purple mark on her. Let me see. He held out his hand. John stood and looked at them. Anger raged inside, but he didn't show it. That's no way to behave, Robert said. That's what I'm saying. John backed up his friend. That's what I told you. The chief turned to him. I see what you're looking at. Mocking. The guy attacked his girlfriend again. That's enough packing. He won't leave you alone tonight. He was looking at Jenna. I already realized that. It's convenient. She didn't realize what was going on. Yes, he went to the hallway shoes, his father. Jenna did not bother to argue with anyone. She followed Robert's example. If you leave now, you may not come back, John shouted after them. If you don't stop working now, you don't have to go out, Robert told him quietly but firmly. I understand. The young man stopped. Robert and Jenna stepped outside. He pointed to the car. I can't. He'd kill me. And Jenna was in shock about everything that was happening. It's gonna be okay. They got in and drove off. He'd planned the whole thing. I couldn't figure it out, Jenna. I don't know. I don't think so, Robert said. Honestly. They drove to the house, and there the man walked her to the door, showed her where she could set up. You're so good to me. She thanked and went to her room. Jenna lay not sitting down. She waited for morning to come so she could go home, but she couldn't stand it either. She went outside. It was still dark. Where are you going? Robert asked her. He was sitting downstairs reading something. Oh, you scared her. I don't think it turned out well. She stood. Was she embarrassed at all? No, it was fine. He got up to see the girl off. If John had gone to bed after they left, he should be back to normal by now. Thank you, she said for the 100th time today. Get in touch, he smiled. The driver started her off in a matter of minutes. She entered the apartment and started packing. Where are you going? Asked John to the girl. How do you think? She put forward her hand, on which there were huge bruises. I'm sorry, he tilted his head. I can't. I've never seen you like this before. She continued doing what she was doing. Jenna, marry me. He stood in front of her on the floor. Are you out of your mind? In the evening, you're yelling and screaming. And now you're proposing. She couldn't keep up with her young man's changing moods. Please, I love you. I'm jealous. I'm crazy about it. He was still standing in front of her. "Stand up." She held out her arms to him. They embraced. Then they went to their room and went to bed together. "How are things at home?" asked Robert at work in the morning. "It's fine. I apologized. She forgave me. We do that a lot." John didn't look him in the eye. "I hadn't noticed," Robert said honestly. "Okay, I went out of the shop." He was so angry. He wanted to take it out on somebody. He started yelling at the workers, and they were silent, as usual. But the guy didn't know that cameras had been installed all around the factory at night. That would keep anything unnecessary out. And also Robert could watch John at work. Robert wanted to see something that he could charge the young man for. He thought back to the ride he had taken with Jenna yesterday. He had liked that girl so much. How could she live with someone like John? "Hi." John came home, and Jenna was waiting for him with dinner. Steamboat Jenna herself didn't know how it was that she hadn't seen in his mouth the real him that he now appeared to be. Nor could she understand how she could love him after all this. But it was true. "Smells good." He sat down at the table. "I tried." Everything seemed to work out for them. After that, the young man called the girl into the bedroom. There he settled on the bed, took the camera in his hands. "What are you doing?" she asked him. "Dance for me," he asked. "Are you crazy?" And Jenna couldn't understand. "What do you want?" He looked at her begging. "Oak." She turned on the music and started moving to the beat. Then John turned on the camera. "Come on. Come on," he encouraged her. "I won't be on camera." She stopped. "What's there to remember? I'll look at how beautiful my wife was later," he begged. "Okay," laughed Jenna. After that, Jenna danced while undressing. Strange as it may seem, but she got so carried away that she forgot about the camera. After the incendiary dancing, the girl climbed into bed, where there was a favorite man. There they had everything and continued. "You are so hot," whispered John to her. "I love you." She was melting at his words. Afterward, they would lie cuddled together for a short time and then fall asleep. It went on like this almost every night. "John, come to my place," Robert called to the young man. "All right now." He was in a hurry. "How are you doing?" Talking to Robert in the office. "Why do you ask? Is everything all right?" John was surprised. "It's been a long time since you and I went anywhere," the boss told him. "Yeah, that's right." He nodded. "Maybe to my place," Robert suggested. "Let Yurka cook something for me then." John volunteered then. "Very good. I'm sick of these bars," said Robert. That's what he wanted. He wanted to see Jenna. After work they met and drove to where John lived. They didn't say a word on the way. They couldn't find anything to talk about. Finally, the car stopped. They got out and walked to the driveway. Jenna had been warned. She came home from school and immediately started cooking. The pie that John loved so much was concocted. They entered the apartment and sat down at the table. "How good you are at cooking," complimented Jenna. "Robert, thank you." She blushed. John noticed it. His fists clenched, but he didn't show it. "How are you doing in school?" Robert asked. It was going well, so it was just the two of them talking. Robert and Jenna. John, as an extra link, was just present. The evening went very well. As Robert got ready to go home, he kissed Jenna's hand. "Liked what?" Angrily, John said as the supervisor left their apartment. "What's wrong with you?" Was she afraid he might do something? Nothing. He grabbed her arm and threw her on the bed. "Please stop," Jenna asked him. Now he went and turned on the camera, and then attacked his wife-to-be. Whatever he did to her that night, she just screamed and cried. "Hello, Jenna," Robert called the next day. "Good afternoon." She didn't understand what he wanted or why he was calling. "How did it go yesterday when I left?" He was really interested in that question. It was fine. She stood in front of the mirror and looked at her face, which had a huge bruise on it. "I want to see you." The man insisted. "I can't." She knew he was testing her, so it didn't go so well. He guessed. "Robert, what did you want?" She cried. "Are you alone now?" he asked first, and then looked at the monitor where he saw John on the cameras. "What kind of question couldn't you understand, Jenna? I'll be right there." He hung up the phone. Jenna had no time to do anything, to think over the plan of action, but the doorbell rang. There was nothing to do but open it. "Jesus," the man looked at her. "What did he do to you?" "That's none of your business." She lowered her eyes. "Yes, it is. He went into the apartment and started packing her things." "What are you doing?" "What do you mean you're doing?" She looked up with big eyes. "We're going to my place. There's nothing for you to do here." He spoke confidently. "What about John?" She was worried. "I'll deal with him myself," Robert promised. After that, they got into the car and drove to his house. After he explained to her where and what to look for, and then he drove to work. "John, I need to talk to you." He called him over to his place. "You've been getting a lot of calls, buddy. One of the employees said he was asleep." "That's none of your business." The guy yelled at him. He quickly went to the office to go up to the boss. "Hey, what do you want?" He walked into the office. "To fire you," said in a stern voice Robert. That smirk he heard. Couldn't stand his tone. "Warden, what did I do?" "Didn't understand, John. What did you do?" Robert turned the monitor to him. "You can't prove anything." The guy got all nervous and twitchy. "Jenna, I got her now. Leave her alone." Spoken calmly. "Robert, you're gonna take my woman for yourself, aren't you?" Shook his head. "Thought he had it all figured out, didn't? All I did was save her from you. You saw her face." He got up from his seat. "1 million, said the young man. "What don't you understand, Robert?" 1 million, and she's yours." Not a muscle flinched on John's face. "And if I report you for carrying from the factory?" He pointed at the monitor. "Ah, you almost threw yourself at it, John. You can't." Robert shook his head negatively. "Are you going to agree to my terms, or is your life going to be hell?" He was no longer embarrassed. "Okay, 1 million, and you never even remember her name. Go to her. It's a deal." They shook hands. John walked happily out from the supervisor's office. He called his car and drove home. There he saw that the bride's belongings were indeed gone. Rubbed his hands together and smiled. He decided to wait a couple days and then start putting his plan into action. This wasn't how he wanted to set things up, of course, but since things hadn't gone according to his plan, he found a loophole here too. A month passed. John knew that Jenna was still living with Robert, so he started following the man. Saw him arrive at work and dialed Jenna's number. "What do you want?" She answered after the second dial tone. "Hello, darling," he said in a unified voice. "Go ahead." She waited. At first, John wanted to tell her that her new suitor had just bought her, but then he decided against it. "I want money every month, 200 million, 300,000. He spoke in a tone that made it impossible to argue with him. "Are you crazy?" She even laughed. "No, but you are. When your video gets into the wrong hands, and you bet it will, I'll be well paid for it." He's laughing now. "John, you won't do that." Her voice was strained. "You know me. I'd do anything for money." She knew that. "Okay, I'll think of something," the girl promised. "That's my girl. I love you." The month went exactly the same date. "You owe me the full amount." He passed out. Jenna sat down on the bed and covered her head with her hands. What should she do? She would not be able to ask Robert for so much. She would tell him where she could get such money, and even monthly. The girl thought for the rest of the evening, until Robert came home. "Hi." He came into Anja's room. "Hello." She got up and walked over to him. "Jenna, let's go together. Let's have dinner," he asked her nicely. Now she had to do everything for them to be together. They went down to the first floor and sat down at a table. "Jenna, have you considered us as a couple?" Asked her a question head-on. "Robert, what about John?" She said that on purpose so he wouldn't think she was frivolous. "What about John?" "I think he's lost his mind. He started putting garnishes on her plate. "Okay, I'll think about your suggestion." And she started eating. It was so embarrassing that she was cheating on such a good man, but she had no other choice. "That's the answer I like," he smiled. From then on, Robert would leave money for Jenna before he left for work, so she could get to school and buy something for herself. And she'd take the crumbs and put the rest away. "Hey, you came home, Robert, and I made you this." And Jenna was downstairs waiting for him. "Where's Valentina?" He was looking around for his assistant. "I decided to let her go and cook for you myself." She was honest. "Thank you." He came over and hugged her for the first time. Jenna didn't resist. "Robert." She looked into his eyes that Robert was looking at her too. "I like you, but I need to get used to it." She was telling the truth. To be honest, she was already confused. Where in this house was the truth and where were the lies? When Robert left to take a shower, she saw that he had left his briefcase downstairs. She walked over, opened it, and there were papers and money. And Jenna clutched it. She didn't want to do this, and she didn't. But right now, her reputation depended on it. The girl took out a few bills, tucked them into her pocket. "What are you doing here?" She just had time to close her briefcase. "I'm looking at that beautiful stone you have." She lied because his bag was on top of it. "Do you want us to drown it?" he asked. Sure, it wasn't a lie. She really wanted to. Now Robert had gone somewhere. He came back, put some wood inside, lit a match, and in 1 minute the fire was blazing inside. It was beautiful. She sat down in front of him. "What did I say?" He lowered himself to the floor beside the girl. She couldn't take her eyes off the fire. She sat and looked at it. She saw different pictures of the world. "You're beautiful." Robert put his hand on her stomach. "Thank you." She was transfixed by what was happening. Robert got up, went to the bar, poured wine into glasses, and brought it to the girl. "I want you to have the same feelings for me that you have for John." He clinked his glass. About her took a sip, and she did too. After that, he started kissing her. Jenna at first was embarrassed. Robert saw this and stopped. "No, keep going." She turned around and hugged him. "You are the most wonderful girl." He touched her lips. In the morning, when Robert wasn't home, she counted it out. All the money she had was missing a couple thousand. But Jenna thought that would be enough. She went to the place where they had agreed to meet John. "Here, give me the records." She handed him the money. "You're a fool. Now you'll give me this much every month." He laughed. "You what? Where will I get them for you?" She looked at him with big eyes, to please her new lover more often. "He will." He turned around and walked away, and Jenna remained standing. She felt like she'd been doused in a slop that would never wash off. She went home and sat thinking again. Why so sad? Robert came up to her. "No, it's okay." She hugged and kissed him. Jenna now knew where the man's money was. She could take it freely, but she didn't want to. "What are we going to do?" Every night they found something to do. "Let's go for a walk." She just wanted to live, not think about something bad every day. "What do you say?" He took her hand, and they left the house. That evening went as well as any other. Robert and Jenna. The relationship progressed slowly. Every month she carried John's money, saved some, took some without asking. It was so disgusting when you deceive someone you've grown close to. 6 months went by. Robert and Jenna were living soulmates. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "No." She turned away and cried. "You what?" Didn't he realize what was going on? "I can't tell." She didn't look at him. When she met John once again, she told him everything. "He's asking me to marry him. I can't marry him while I'm cheating." She begged him to give him Plushenko. "You what?" "It's a gold mine. As a wife, you can bring even more." He rejoiced. Jenna looked at the man she once loved. His eyes were crazy and his laugh was the same. "I can't," she screamed. "Then anyone with your ass on all the screens." He pointed to Jenna's pocket. "Well, please leave me alone," she cried. "Have you thought about me?" John walked in the opposite direction from her, and Jenna returned home. Her attitude was serious. She was waiting for someone she felt good about to come home. You might even say she loved him. But the girl was afraid to admit it to herself. "Hi, sweetheart." He hugged her. "Hello." She was hiding her eyes from him. "I couldn't figure out what was wrong with you, Robert." "I can't tell you that," Jenna said, "but you try." He crouched down and sat her next to him. "Okay," she took in more air. "I'm ready to hear everything, and I'll accept any truth from you," he told her. "I'm so ashamed." She couldn't keep her voice down, and Jenna fell silent. "My love, speak," he asked. "John." She started to what? "What John? Are you talking to him?" Was shocked. "Man, yeah." She lowered her head even lower. "I can't believe it. After everything he did to you." Robert even stood up. "When we lived with him, he often filmed me dancing, and then what happened in bed." She blurted it out so fast that some of the words just got lost. "And what wasn't getting through to the man? When you took me away, he called a few days later and started blackmailing me with it. Told me to give him money." "I'm sorry," she cried. "It's okay. Tell me what happened next." He sat closer to her and hugged her. "I didn't know where to get finances from you. I couldn't ask you. So I was saving from the ones you were leaving me." And she couldn't say the next sentence, and took without asking. He finished. "You thought I wouldn't notice. But if you need it, it's no shame." She raised swollen and crying eyes to him. "I'm sorry," she said again. "It's all right. Don't think about anything else at all. And don't cry." He put his arms around her and kissed her. Jenna couldn't believe it had gone like this. There was no fighting or arguing or anything like that. "Sweetheart, so you will be my wife?" He asked his big question again. "What about the shoot?" She couldn't understand. She didn't want anyone to see her. "It'll be fine. I said I'd do what I said. So I'll do what I said." He kissed her again. "If that's the case, then of course I'll do it." She pressed herself against his chest, realized that with this man she had nothing to worry about at all. The very next day, Robert had hired people to track John down, take away his camera and all the tapes and flash drives. Now he definitely didn't have any dirt, but he didn't stop there. Apparently, there was money. By now he was stalking Jenna. He went crazy with it, realized things weren't going his way. "Hey, you bitch," he hissed. When Jenna arrived at school, she would run back to the car, get in it, and sit there. That is until Robert arrived and walked her to the classroom. "Robert, he's lost his mind." Jenna told her future husband. "We'll get over it somehow." He always knew something to comfort her. "I'm scared. What if he shows up at our wedding?" Jenna was afraid. "I expected anything from that man. Let him try." The wedding had to be postponed because John forged some documents and gave them out as from Robert Togo's firm, so they started checking, dragging him through the courts. Good thing the firm had a great lawyer who quickly cleared the whole thing up. Now John was being sought not only by Robert's trackers, but also by law enforcement. But that's it. I guess nothing can stop us now. Robert and Jenna's wedding date has been rescheduled. Good. She's calmed down a little bit too and stopped being scared. They invited a lot of friends, acquaintances, and family. "There's the man I always told you about." Camille pointed at her son-in-law. "Thank you, Mommy, for everything." Her daughter hugged her. "You're welcome, darling. The important thing is that you're doing well." They were happy. The wedding went off without a hitch. Robert couldn't be happy to have such a wife. "So, do you want to go on a trip or a flight?" he asked her. "No, I'm fine with you here." Jenna never left his side. Robert took a vacation. He decided to leave all business and devote himself to the woman he loved. The week flew by quickly, but it was like a fairy tale. Robert had so much lost love that he gave it all to Jenna. "Where were you before? Why didn't you take me away from him sooner?" She didn't live in his arms. "If I had, I would have." He held her so tightly in his arms and knew he would never let her go anywhere. A couple months later, Jenna met her husband at the door. "What's wrong with you?" He smiled. "I feel like someone is going to be a daddy soon." She looked at him. "I don't believe it." He lifted her into his arms. "Believe it." She put her arms around his neck. "Lord, not only have you given me the most beautiful woman, but she's going to give me an heir as well." He couldn't believe it. Things couldn't be that good. The pregnancy was difficult, and Jenna was not well. The paramedics had been called to her several times. What was it that she didn't realize? Her mom had told her that when she was pregnant, everything was fine, and she couldn't feel anything. It happens. That's all the doctor said to her. Okay, Jenna was patient, and she wanted to make her husband happy so badly that she could endure and endure anything. She did, steadfastly for 9 months. And now they're taking her to the hospital. Soon their baby will be born. Breathe. That's all Jenna could hear through the worst of the pain. What am I doing? She couldn't even breathe with every movement. Every movement was painful. Come on, screamed the midwife. Exhaled the girl. She thought she was going to die herself while delivering this baby. And suddenly, there was such relief. No pain, there was nothing else. There was dead silence in the room, and Jenna even rose up on her elbows. And at that moment, there was a shrill cry of a child. The girl put her on her mother's chest, whispered Jenna such a beautiful name. Standing next to the nurse like a little angel, explained the mother. She really does look like one. The woman took the girl, wrapped her in diapers, and took her away, and lay down for a while longer. And then Robert came to see her. He was informed, and he immediately rushed to his favorite girls. Congratulations, my love. He bent over his wife. Thank you. She kissed him. You're beautiful. He corrected her, kicked the jokes, and it's already okay. She realized he was doing it on purpose to make her forget. They were transferred to a room that Robert had paid for. Everything here was state-of-the-art. But Jenna didn't need any of that. She just wanted to get home. And so they were on their way to a place where they were loved and waited for, and smiled and held their baby girl in their arms. Robert, of course, had prepared everything according to the other way he just couldn't. Jenna entered the nursery and gasped. Everything was so beautiful, especially for their baby girl. And you had tried so hard. She kissed him again and again. Drunk worked. It had been 2 months since the birth of the baby girl. Jenna was doing everything to make her daughter feel good. The grandparents came to visit, but Jenna said she would do everything on her own. So they just visited and left. Robert was so proud of his wife, he couldn't even put it into words. I'm gonna take my daughter for a walk, she told her husband. Well, he was not worried because Jenna always walked through the local traffic and never strayed far from home. This day she went out, walked the same route she always did. Then she remembered that she needed to stop by a local store. The clerk had asked for the number of a manicurist. She looked around for someone to leave with the stroller. Then she thought nothing would happen in a minute. She left her daughter by the porch. She quickly went in, put her business card on the counter, and immediately came out and looked in the stroller. Her daughter, wrapped in a blanket, sleeping peacefully. Let's go home, Jenna said, calmly, and walked down the paths again. She walked, humming something to herself, looking ahead where she could already see their house. She walked through the gate, walked up to the porch. The security guard offered to bring the stroller and the baby home, but Jenna refused. She would bring her daughter in herself. The girl threw the lid of the stroller, took out the baby in a blanket, and it seemed somehow light, pulled back the corner, and there, instead of the baby, some rags. Screamed the mother so loudly that ran out of all the guards. Robert ran out too. Jenna, what happened? He bent over her. The daughter. She was sitting on the stroller. Call everyone in immediately, the man said. There was so much traffic, you couldn't miss a fly. Whoever did this couldn't have gotten far. He couldn't have gotten past the guards in a car. So it would have to be on foot and through the woods. The uniformed man who'd just arrived was making his conclusions. That we're standing here. "We need to run in there and calm the area," the woman shouted. She was ready to run wherever she needed to go. "Maybe we should leave the mother at home," the lawman asked. "No, Robert, I want to come with you." "Don't leave me alone," begged Jenna. "Okay, she will come with us," he agreed. Together, they walked towards the forest, which started at the edge where the last houses were. And the one who had done all this wasn't going to run far. As soon as the people entered the forest, he heard their voices and began to make noise himself so that he would be found sooner. "I think the sounds are coming from over there." One of the policemen pointed with his hand. "Let's go." He looked at the girl's mother and father. Quickly, Jenna hurried everyone. They got through some storm, found themselves on some yielding hillock, and Jenna almost fainted when she saw John standing there with her little girl in his arms. "What do you want?" asked what he thought was an important question for this man. "Robert Place," he answered honestly. "John, you don't dare get hysterical." "Jenna, do you doubt it?" He lifted the child above his head. "There's no need to provoke him," one of the men in uniform asked. "Please, you want me to go with you, but don't do anything to the child." Jenna stood up. "I don't need anything from you." He laughed his ugly laugh, and he leaned back so far that it looked like he was going to fall. Then what? What all this was for, no one understood. "You don't know how bad and painful it was for me. Now I want you to feel the same way. Try to feel what I felt." And again that lunatic laughter was the conclusion of most of those present. "What is?" Jenna saw one of the men pick up a pebble from the ground and go somewhere for a concession. She wondered what he was up to. "John, remember how you and I were friends, how we loved each other?" And she was quietly approaching him. "What do you think? Is that going to make me feel better?" He looked her in the eye. "I don't know. I thought you loved me for real. Why do you think I married Robert to take so much from him? We have enough to last us a lifetime." And she lied. But her voice didn't even waver once. "Drink," John heard from downstairs. He looked up, and at that moment Jenna snatched the blanket from him, and the others threw him to the ground. "Oh, you set me up as usual." He was beating hysterically. "You wanted to rob me of the most precious thing I have in the world." She walked over to her husband, and Robert put his arms around her. "Everyone, let's go home," he told Jenna. She lifted the corner. Her daughter was looking at her. "It's okay," she whispered and kissed her. They returned home more or less calm. But Jenna could not forget the incident for a long time. Now she walked with the baby only outside the house. How did John's case end? She didn't go to any hearings. She didn't care as long as he was never in their lives again. He was committed to a psychiatric hospital, so I don't think he'll be out of there for a while. Or will he ever? I'm glad it's over. She was sitting next to the crib where their little girl was sniffling. "Come here," he held out his arms to her. Jenna got up and walked over to her husband. "Do you know how much your John valued you at? Finally decided to come clean, Robert. Did he sell me out?" She couldn't believe me. "For $1 million. He held her close. "You priced me pretty cheap." She laughed. "I was willing to give whatever he said, because I liked you even then." He kissed the woman who made him happy. "I'm glad to hear that. I hope you don't sell me out." She laughed. "Not for any money in the world." He hugged her tighter. There was a little girl crying in the crib. Mommy needed to feed her. Robert looked at his loved ones and only admired them. "Are you embarrassing me?" She looked at her husband. "You should know how beautiful it is." He got up and left the room.